Morning. My name is Susan Yvette Price, and I have the honor and privilege of spending time today with Charles Price, retired presiding circuit court judge of the 15th Judicial Circuit of Alabama. Welcome, Judge.
Thank you.
As your daughter, I have a unique perspective. I've known, loved, and admired you all my life. Not only will I be speaking to you today as your daughter, but also as someone well acquainted with the law. I served as a federal law clerk in this very building to Senior 11th Circuit Court of Appeals Judge Joel F. Dabena when he was a federal district court judge for the Middle District of Alabama. I practiced law for more than 20 years in Seattle, Washington, and I have both read your stories and I have lived your truth my entire life. Insightful, courageous, stubborn, just, trailblazing, humorous, impatient, resilient, God-fearing, villain, tenacious, husband, father, human. Judge, these are just a few of the descriptions of you, both complimentary and critical, that others have shared over the years. It's been quite a journey for a poor boy who grew up on the edge of Montgomery, Alabama, literally across the rail tracks. More than 60 years as a husband, more than 50 years as a father, more than 45 years as an attorney, and 33 years as a circuit court judge. In sum, yours is a life and a career successfully realized through family, service, and servant leadership. I cannot possibly name all of the awards, recognitions, and honors you've received at the local, state, and national levels. You were the first in so many endeavors and broke racial barriers in Alabama, from the prosecutor's office to the Montgomery County Courthouse, Phelps Price Justice Center, that bears your name. You have received numerous awards from community and faith-based organizations. You were the recipient of the 1997 John F. Kennedy Profiles in Courage Award and the 1998 National Education Association's Martin Luther King Jr. Humanitarian Award. You have been honored twice by the National Bar Association. In 2011, the street where you grew up was named in your honor. A scholarship has been established by your fraternity in your name. As a member of the Elite Special Forces Unit of the Army, you distinguished yourself and ultimately retired from the reserves as a lieutenant colonel, Judge Advocate General's Corps. And you have paved the way for oh so many young lawyers of color. I think that's the definition of a living legacy, one who spends life caring about the world and taking action to try to make life better for others. What a journey indeed. Today, in the time that we have, I'd like you to unpack that life a little bit so that others may gain a better understanding of the human being on the bench. In William Shakespeare's comedy, As You Like It, the character Jocks defined the 7 stages of a man's life. Now, clearly, I am no Shakespeare, but I think you might be able to share your narrative in 5 chapters, especially given the fact that your book is still being written. Chapter 1, let's hear about your childhood. Chapter 2, let's hear about the soldier in preparation. Chapter 3, let's talk about the seeker of justice. Chapter 4, let's hear the judge's summation. Chapter 5, the journey continues. Chapter 1, Childhood. I want to start with a derivation of an African proverb to frame this period. To know the man, we must understand the child. You were born May 9th, 1939. Where?
In Montgomery County, in a little community called Hunter Station, northwest of the city of Montgomery, on the Birmingham Highway, commonly called Highway 31, which was the highway from Montgomery to Birmingham before the interstate was developed.
Were you born in a hospital?
Oh, no. At that time, there was no hospitals that admitted black people in the city of Montgomery. I was born and delivered by a midwife.
Okay. Your mother's name?
Betsy Allen Price.
And your father's name?
Alpha Price.
And did you have any siblings?
Yes, there was 6 of us, and so there was 3 prior to me. I was the 4th child, and 2 under me.
Okay. What kind of community was Hunter Station?
Well, Hunter Station was an enclosed community, about 650 square acres, purchased by a black former slave in 1865, Mr. Madison, who moved from the plantation that he was on to this community. He and 2 or 3 other families, and after that, it continued to grow.
What about the house you grew up in?
It was a typical house at that time. It was 3 bedrooms and perhaps a small living room, commonly called a shotgun house, and that means that you could stand in the front, look through the front door, through the back door with rooms on the side.
At one point, I know your father moved out of the house. How old were you when that happened?
My mother and father divorced when I was in the 6 or 7 year old range. And he, although he continued to live in the same community, but they divorced, and pretty well, in my opinion, as I observed them, got along better after they divorced than they did when they were married. Maintained membership in the same church, and I would see him in the community.
Did he play a role in your upbringing?
Not from a standpoint of a parent being actively involved in a child's life. I would see him, he was very polite, but no, my mother reared me.
So share a little bit more then about your mom.
My mother was from the city, grew up in the community called Bel Air, in the area where Alabama State University is located. And how she and my father met, I don't know. But she was a hard-working lady who worked many jobs to support her family. She worked at the old Jefferson Davis Hotel, Sellers Grocery Store in Montgomery. Those are names that people still remember today. And she was a very good seamstress. Mm-hmm. And so she took in sewing and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Growing up, what was your sense of your economic status in the world?
Well, if you look at, as we classified your status based on economics, we were, it was a poor community, poor family.
Did you know you were poor?
Perhaps didn't recognize at the time because we all were on the same level. Mm-hmm. But as I grew older, branched out into a larger world, I realized that we were considered economically poor, but spiritually very rich.
So Hunter Station was a black community.
Black community.
Did you interact with whites, or were there conflicts with whites?
Well, Hunter Station was a black community with a white community on the northern side and a white community on the southern side. Mm-hmm. There was no interaction other than occasionally employer-employee relationship.
Where did you start school?
There was a school, small school in the community, George Washington Carver Elementary School, a three-room school that we in the Hunter Station community and the black community attended through the 3rd grade.
So now I've heard a story about when you were around 7 years old. You experienced a life-threatening health scare. that effectively put your schooling on hold.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, at around 7 years old, perhaps in the second or third grade, I had a very serious health problem, and it lingered for a while because at the time there was no doctors that were readily treating black people. There was two who would treat black folks. You had to go in the back door, a side door, and that was Dr. Martin and Dr. Hubbard. And so my appendix ruptured. Didn't know what it was. After suffering through the pain and discomfort quite some time, my mother finally took me to Dr. Hubbard. Dr. Hubbard had a small clinic on the corner of Lake and Hall Street near Oak Park, and he would treat black patients there. He would put you on a gurney and lift you up to the second floor, wherever the clinic waiting room was. And I remember that. And Dr. Hubbard operated going in through my stomach first, and of course then understand that really what had happened was my appendix had burst on the right side. Very serious operation, I understand, and treated me. That did delay me for about a year and a half in school because it was treatment at home, aftercare, and many trips back to the doctor.
So if I understand it correctly, they didn't know when they went in that
Right.
you actually had appendicitis.
Absolutely.
They just knew that you had a stomach issue.
Yes.
Okay, and then once they opened up, they
Yes.
realized that your appendix had burst.
Yes.
Wow. So during that recuperation period, I know you and your mother had been close,
Yes.
but did you grow closer during that
Well,
period?
yes, I remember very vividly my mother coming to the clinic almost daily, talking to the doctor, and that was a phenomenal thing. A white doctor talking to a black mother. I do remember that, and my mother would work all day and come to the clinic in the afternoon and struggled through getting transportation because we did not have a car. And I grew stronger to my mother.
I bet she was one of your childhood heroes.
She was.
Did you have any others?
Well, yes, as you look for heroes, first of all, my mother was my hero. And just in the community, a hero is someone that you grow to admire because what they do and what they represent. And so in the community, I would see all the fathers going to work. There was a plant in the community, Standard Forge and Axle Company. It was a good job. I would see the fathers leaving home in the morning, 7 o'clock, going to work, coming back in the afternoon, 4:30 from work. So I grew up understanding that working for a living was a major and honorable thing. And so those men that took care of their families and taught us sports and encouraged us youngsters along the way were my heroes. I didn't have to look far to some other state or some other profession for heroes. They were right there in the community.
What middle school did you attend?
The middle school was called Lomac Hannon, was on the old Selma Road community, which was about 5 miles from Hunter Station on the west side of town. And we attended that school through the 6th grade, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade.
Now, going back to talking about work,
Yes,
I understand that during middle school, you worked as a golf caddy.
yes.
Can you tell us about that experience?
Well, there weren't any jobs for young black males or females during that time in the summer. You either just idle away at home, basically engaged in some activity that kept you busy. Now, some of us were able to do construction work or work with brick masons, which I did on and off. The caddy thing became a source of income on the weekend, mainly Saturday and Sundays at Maxwell Air Force Base. My community was 4 miles northwest of Maxwell Air Force Base. So basically, walking to Maxwell was a fun thing because I didn't have transportation, and walking from Maxwell after caddying half a day or a whole day back to the community was a fun thing. So yes, I caddied, and if the club manager liked you, which he did come to like me, he would make sure at 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock, you'll go out with the first group that tee off, and sometimes you carry double. That means you working for both, 2 golfers and carrying 2 bags. And usually we'll come in about 11 o'clock and $1.50 a piece and maybe a quarter each or 50 cents each tip, and you made $4.50, and that was a lot of money at that time. Mm-hmm. And then you go back on Sunday, or you can stay around on Saturday and try to get another flight that afternoon, which means you could make about $5. So on Sunday you would go back and repeat the same thing.
So I don't play golf, but I hear there are lots of lessons you can learn, lots of conversations you can have on the golf course.
Yes.
What did you learn?
Well, it was new to me because the golfers were high-ranking military officers, lieutenant colonels, a few majors, very few captains or enlisted men were playing. Basically, it was high-ranking military officers, and I observed them and overheard their conversations, speaking very well, enjoying life, and I was always curious about that. How did they get this advantage of being in these positions when there were others perhaps who worked as hard as they did but didn't have the opportunity or the chance to enjoy that type of life? Mm-hmm. I never saw myself perhaps enjoying that type of life, although now I do play golf. And it was a learning experience. I was always quiet, but listening to them and observing them, the way they behaved, the way they carried themselves. And I think there was some advantage to that.
You were a teenager during the 1950s.
Yes.
And the civil rights movement ramped up considerably during your teenage years.
Yes.
In fact, you were a teenager during the bus boycott.
About 14 or 15 years old.
Did you have a sense that something really big was happening in Montgomery?
Yes. Well, we didn't. The bus, riding the bus was not a big thing for us in my community because the bus didn't go beyond the city limits. And basically where Hunter Station is at that time was considered very rural, although it's in the city limits now, but it's very rural. And so riding the bus wasn't a thing of high priority to me. But once the bus boycott started, I recognized that, didn't understand it, but something big was happening, because on Monday afternoons, and that's when the mass meetings were usually on Monday nights, around 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, my mother and others from the community would gather at Mr. Will Ashley house, a man who had transportation, and a couple other families had cars, and they would meet at the church, Mount Pleasant AME Zion Church, and they would go to the mass meetings. And then they'll come back and talk about what was going on. Everybody was spellbound by Dr. King's ability and oration and his message. So something was happening, and we knew it was big, but didn't understand the gravity of it at the time. Mm-hmm. Also, this was the time of the murder of 54 in that range, Emmett Till, and so we had that as part of the history of how to behave and what to do and not to do. So those two events, it sort of helped shape my life in a way, yeah.
What were you told not to do, and how were you told to behave?
Well, basically, you understood that was segregation because you didn't have much contact with whites and blacks, didn't have much contact. And surely to be on your best manners, I would call that, manners you were taught in high school and taught by your parents, and to avoid conflict if at all possible. And so those kinds of things that you knew your space, it became priority in your life, and you were in a safe zone if you had good manners and responded to people in a way very politely and move on.
I heard a story not too long ago, I didn't know this before, of a time when you and a friend of yours had stars in your eyes and set your sights on working and being successful in the big city of New York. I think you were around 15, 16 at the
Yes.
time. Tell us about that adventure and the lessons you learned from that.
Well, like all teenagers during the summer, you would like to make some money during the summer before you go back to school. But like I said, there were no jobs really available for young blacks to work other than the opportunity to caddy, and maybe at there was a junkyard on the Birmingham Highway, the Kelly junkyard, and they would let us come up there and make a few dollars. So my friend and I would go to the employment office, and it was on Clay Street, Clayton, and apply for summer jobs. There were no jobs available, and we would continue to go back and apply every Monday morning, I think, and there's just no jobs. And so they finally told us, one of the workers finally told us that there was a group coming through, and they were looking for workers. And if we wanted to be with that group and find work, be back on a certain day, that early in the morning, and we could perhaps join them in finding jobs. Well, we did. We went back and we told our families, our parents, and I remember very vividly my mother was sitting on the front porch at the time, and when I told her what I was going to do, she didn't approve of it, but she was not adamantly against it, but not approval. But she said, I will be back in about 2 weeks. So we went up that morning, and the group we understood they were going to New York. Now, we didn't know where New York was, to be honest with you. We thought New York was just a couple miles away, and when we get there, we would leave the truck. We thought we were going on the truck, and get a job and make some money and come back home. Well, when we got there, discovered that this group of individuals were riding in a converted old school bus, and they consist of adults, children, women, men, and they talked to us, and we said yes. We were very daring. We'll go with you. And what we discovered, they were migrant workers that were leaving Florida, who seasonal workers. They would travel around from farms to different places and work, and that's how they took care of their families. So we got on the bus, and it took us 2 or 3 days, about 2 days, more than 2 days to get to New York, to Hamilton, New York. Now that was all strange to us. All these individuals knew each other. We didn't know them, and they didn't know us. So we got there, and we were assigned sleeping quarters, which was shanties. Discovered that they cooked their food over open fires, without any exaggeration, raw sewage running. And how in the world could people live like that? I mean, my living condition was poor, but it surely wasn't like that. So we were there in Hamilton, New York, and it was a farm where they were picking beans, and they were paying 50 cents a hamper. Well, I discovered after a couple of days I wasn't going to make any money because it took me forever to pick a hamper of beans. So after a week, we left that camp, literally escaped. One morning, you had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. You catch the truck or the trailer, really the large trailers with people on it, to go out to the field. So we went the other direction. I'm sure they were looking for us. But anyway, we were hitchhiking, and a man came along with that worked and was supervisor of another farm, and he picked us up and then asked where we were going and where we had been, and we told him, and he said, well, we got a farm up here, come with me, you can go to work here. So we went to that farm, and he said, we pay 75 cents a hamper. But what we discovered was, make a long story short, they were picking wax beans or yellow beans, and it took twice as many wax bean or yellow beans to fill a hamper than green beans. So we're still getting cheated because they were paying 75 cents a hamper, but we had to do twice as much work. So after a week, we left and hitchhiked into the city of Hamilton. And I remember we stopping at a drugstore that had a phone booth outside when you used to have the phone booths. And my friend James Traylor, his father had a good job, and he just got tired of, didn't see an end to what we were doing. So he called his father, and they wired him a ticket through Western Union, I believe, to come home. I went there. Well, first of all, my mother didn't have a telephone, and I'm sure she didn't have any money, so I had to figure out how this was going to work. So I hitchhiked on into Syracuse, went to Syracuse, New York, went to the bus station, tried to join the Navy, but I didn't have a birth certificate and wasn't of age. So I sat in the bus station for about 3 nights and 2 days, obviously not understanding big city life, seeing youngsters coming through, and I'm convinced they wasn't up to anything good, and that was all new to me. So I sat there and trying to figure out how I'm gonna get a job, what I'm going to do. But anyway, there was a sign near an office that says Traveler's Aid. I was at the Greyhound bus station, Traveler's Aid, and those signs were very prominent during that time in the bus station. And one morning, about the third morning, people were lining up, families with children and husband, wives, and I figured out whatever they're doing, they were trying to get some help from this particular office. And I got in the front of the line and went in and talked to the gentleman, told him I was from Alabama, I was headed to 10th grade, and whatever else he asked me. And he gave me a broom to sweep the office and clean up in the office. And as the next family came in asking for help, I heard him say that they only sent out one family a day, and he was going to send that boy who was cleaning up. So I was happy about that. And he talked to me, because I was about 16, 17. And he talked to me and he said, if I send you home, will you go back to school? I said, well, if you send me home, I'll stay in school. And he did, gave me a ticket. I believe he gave me I recall, money for food, about $2. Bought some food down the Greyhound bus station, down the Greyhound bus, and returned to Montgomery. About 2 weeks and a day after I left, which the prophecy of my mother was proven to be correct.
Did your mother say, I told you so?
No, she was happy to see me. I'm sure she was thinking that, but she didn't rub it in on me. But now my friends did, but she didn't.
What an amazing story,
Yes.
because this is in the 1950s.
1950s, yes.
And Traveler's Aid really was run by a white male.
Yes.
And most of the families who needed aid were white families.
Sure.
And yet he was willing to put you in the front of the line
Yes.
and send you home.
Yes.
Did you ever keep up? with him or
You know,
touch base with him?
that was my intention once I got older and had some means, financial means to try to contact that particular office. I never did, but when it did, I didn't contact that particular office, but it sure made me very sensitive toward people traveling, especially with kids who needed help. And I've been very generous with helping people in need out of that experience.
How about the interaction and observations of the migrant workers? How did that affect
That's
you?
a terrible life. We read about them in California. Chavez, organized the farm workers in California. We don't understand unless you study that group, the kind of life they live. But they're taking care of children and women and hard-working folks. And if given the opportunity in the general society, they perhaps could have better jobs. But they get locked into that type of work. Usually, coming to the country to do seasonal work, or your life get burdened down with children and family doing that kind of work, so you're locked in. And I'm very sympathetic and open toward helping those type individuals.
So you're back, you're moving into your high school years.
Yes.
I understand you were an athlete. What sport did
I
you
played
participate
baseball, ran track in high school.
in? Okay.
And my family, in my family, the males were very good athletes, baseball players. I wasn't that good, but they put me in the game to make the number since I was a Price. And the Price family could put 9 persons on diamond and have some left over. So I got in the mix. I got recognized as a person who can play baseball. But I did run track in high school.
You were also on the debate team, weren't
I was
you?
on the debate team.
Okay, what led you to debate?
Well, I always, out of Sunday school and church, I guess, always participated in giving speeches and getting your opinions on certain things. And so there was a belief by my mother and others in the community that I was going to be a preacher. Later, I was going to be a preacher or a lawyer.
Okay.
And it just followed me to high school. And some of the teachers encouraged me to join the debate team.
Okay. I think many folks here in Montgomery might be surprised to learn that you once worked at one of our storied eateries,
Yes.
Chris's Hot Dog.
Yes.
How did that job come about?
I was in the 11th grade. A friend of mine worked at Chris Hot Dog Restaurant, or stand it was called. He worked in the morning. He would go down at 5 o'clock in the morning and pack the boxes and clean up and then come to school. And that job came open in the afternoon from 4 to 8. He told me about it. I went down, talked to the manager, a gentleman named Gus Lazo. He hired me. So I would leave Carver School on Fairview Avenue, walk downtown. Very seldom did I catch the bus and get downtown about 4 o'clock, work until 10 minutes to 8, leave Chris Hot Dog stand on Dexter Avenue, go down to Trailway bus station that was down around Moulton Street, catch the bus at night. It was going to Birmingham, but it had to go the Birmingham Highway, so it'll go through Hunter Station, and that's when you could pull a cord, the bell will go off, and the bus driver really knew the stops, and it would stop on the Birmingham Highway in front of New Hope Baptist Church. I would get off and walk home.
So tell me about that experience working at Chris's.
Well, it was. I was a hard worker. I was very manable. And so Gus, if you go in the Chris Hot Dog Stand today, it's set up the same way. It just celebrated its 100th year and hadn't been any changes, to be honest with you. And there's a cash register up front that was used primarily for the goods, the merchandise that was sold up front, which at that time, Chris Stand sold all of the major magazines, the major newspapers, New York Times and those type things. And the soda machines, the soda boxes were up front. They sold liquor, spirits by the pint or half a pint, they were up front. So really, if you're going to buy those things, you stop at that cash register up front. And then if you're going to buy the food, you'll walk back to the steam table where they were fixing the food and serving hot dog. That was cash register there, which is still there today. It's set up the same way. And Gus, all of these individuals came over from Greece. They were Greeks. And Gus, with an offering, I believe, that came over and Mr. Chris gave him a chance. And he was very, very good person. And after a period of time, he told me to work the cash register up front. Now, that didn't go over well with a lot of people coming in, particularly the night crowd. And they made all kind of comments. And Shirley went back there and talked to Gus, but didn't deter him. And even those who wanted to pass me and diss me because they weren't going to deal with it, he'll send them back up there. And after a period of time, that night crowd sort of got used to that I was operating the cash register at the front, which perhaps was the first African-American, particularly young child, to operate a cash register in a white establishment that catered primarily to white people who had some problem with it, but got used to it. And it was because of Gus Lazar, the manager, who was not going to change that situation.
That's quite a statement to make.
Sure.
For a very popular
Sure.
Restaurant,
Sure.
eatery,
Right.
to have.
My picture's on the wall there now.
Is it
In
really?
fact, they requested I take a photograph, and my picture's on the wall next to Gus with some other photographs. Yeah.
Did you keep in touch with Gus?
Oh yes. Every time I came home, and oh yes, and after I moved back to Montgomery, I keep in contact with the family. The family now that own the restaurant, and sure.
And you were actually a participant in the funeral services
Yeah, when
too.
Gus died, the Greek Orthodox Church is on Mount Medge Road, and he had a sister in Detroit, and she requested that that I speak at his funeral and make some comments. And I was at the funeral, and I went up to speak and thought I was just going in front of the audience. And the priest called me up to the pulpit, and I went up and made the comments. So that was very moving to me, and I appreciate their generosity and understanding how appreciative I was for what Gus had done for me. And, I still go to the restaurant now, and I'm just as popular around there as the owner.
But what comes out of this is an understanding that even though there was definitely a divide
Yes.
in the 50s between black and white,
Yes,
and certainly in the 40s, you had a doctor
yes,
who was willing to operate on you and saved your life. You certainly had the man in the bus station up in
New
New
York,
York
yes.
who was willing to give you a bus ticket, provided you
yeah,
you pledged that you would continue with your education. And then even here in Montgomery, you had someone who was a manager
Sure.
in a popular restaurant
back in the 60s.
who made a very public statement.
Yeah, sure.
Amazing.
Well, in fact, I did make an effort to find Dr. Hubbard when I moved back here to visit him to say how thankful I was. He had moved to North Carolina But his son just happened to be a retired financial planner, investor, and was doing volunteer work in the county courthouse. Charles Hubbard.
Okay.
And I happened to see him one day, and I talked to him, and I told him about that, and it turned out to be his father. And his father had deceased in North Carolina. But I did get a chance to express my appreciation to him, and we became pretty close after that.
Great. In high school, I believe you met a young lady who would change the course of your life.
Yes. In the 11th grade, I met a young lady who later became my wife and became your mother, but who was a very, very serious student. And I surely wanted to talk to her and try to date her. And the type of student I was and the type of student she was, I'm sure that was a little interest and allowed me to talk to her. But over a period of time, I eventually persuaded her that I was worthy of talking to her, and she relented. And we became friends, started dating latter part of 11th grade, go to the prom in the 12th grade, eventually became my wife.
Great. And you graduated from high school in
Yes.
1959.
Yes.
Were you the first in your family?
Oh,
to
yes.
graduate
I
from
was
high
the first in my family to graduate from high school. My older two brothers and sisters were very smart, but didn't have the opportunity to do much beyond the black community. So both of my brothers joined the military and served in Korea. And both of them ended up, one brother was in the Army and Air Force. One brother was with the 82nd, and one brother was with the 101st
Okay.
Airborne. And I admired them. And I appreciated them for joining the military, sending money back to help my mother take care of me. And the good thing about it, I was able to express that to them. One is deceased and my oldest brother's still alive, but I was able to explain to them how appreciative for the opportunities I've had for what they did. But anyway, I admired them. So I knew earlier, around the 10th grade, 11th grade, that I wanted a career in the military. The military was a way out of poverty and out of a local locked-in situation. And so when I finished high school, I joined the military.
So we're going to talk about that, but let me ask you this one question. As you close this particular chapter of your life, what lessons or revelations did you take with you
From
all the way up through the graduation at high school?
high school. Well, you had to, first of all, you had to work hard. Now, I hear people talk about hard work. A lot of folks work hard, but they sort of stand still. So working hard is not the key to it. But having a strong work ethic, knowing that you got to work for what you get. And that along the way, if you're honest, trustworthy, show people that you want an opportunity, there'll be people on the way to help you. And out of the New York situation, out of the Chris hot dog situation, and other events, that what proved to me to be what you need to do. I have found in life, and even growing up, and I look back on that. First of all, you have to be focused. You have to have some idea of what it is you want to do, and it has to be something that you're capable of doing. And you have to be focused on it. You have to have discipline to pursue it. But the key thing you got to have dedicated perseverance, because it's going to be a hard challenge. And it was a hard challenge, but it stayed the course.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go to chapter 2,
Okay.
the soldier
Yes.
in preparation. When I think about the stories you've told me regarding this period of your life, I am reminded of a quote by Abraham Lincoln. If I had only 1 hour to chop down a tree, I would spend the first 45 minutes sharpening my axe. Let's talk about how you sharpened your axe. Which one came first now, marriage or military?
Military.
Okay.
I finished high school in May of, perhaps during that time you're graduating around May the 28th, 27th, 59. June the 10th of the same year, I went in the military.
Where were you stationed?
I was stationed, I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training. Since I wanted to be a paratrooper, stayed at Jackson, well, went to Fort Gordon, then went back to Fort Jackson for advanced infantry. Then from there to Fort Benning, the jump school. And from jump school, then to Fort Bragg, the 2nd Airborne Division.
So as you entered the military, what hopes did you have about military service, and what was your reality?
Well, there was no question about that was one of the avenues I was going to pursue. It was a chance to really find out what the opportunities were and what could I accomplish. And so it met all my expectations. Basic training, advanced training. Being a paratrooper was the elite branch at that time. And I always wanted a challenge in life. And to succeed in finishing jump school in 3 weeks, that's how long it was, jumping out of airplanes, taking a chance on your life. That instilled quite a bit of accomplishment to me.
So that is a factor, or a fact, that people don't really know about you, that you were both a paratrooper
Yeah.
with the 82nd Airborne Division and a member of Special Forces.
Well, Special Forces came second.
Okay, also though known as the Green Berets.
Yes.
One of the most elite and highly trained military group
Right.
in the armed forces. What led you to jump out of planes and then join the Special Forces?
Well, I was stationed at Fort Bragg. I went to Germany from Fort Bragg with the unit from Fort Bragg. Stayed in Germany for, it was an airborne unit in Germany, 509th Airborne Brigade. Stayed in Germany a little over 2 years. Came back and was discharged. Bernice and I had gotten married before I went to Germany. She was in college. First of all, she was from a family that she had the opportunity to go to college. And so she was in college. And I could, even after serving 3 years in the military, coming back to Montgomery, there still was no job for blacks that you could make a decent salary. And I would go to college, support my wife in college, and then go to law school. So she was at Tuskegee University. I went up and talked to her, told her that I would rejoin for 3 more years, and after the 3 years she'd be finished with college working, I'll get out, go to college, and go to law school. She didn't like it, I didn't like it, but it was the best what I could see that would give me an opportunity to accomplish what I want to accomplish. So that's what I did.
Okay.
So I went back to Fort Bragg, and at that time, as Vietnam was heating up, Guatemala and the Dominican Republic was in a scrimmage down in Central America. So the Army activated a new group, the 8th Group, 1st Special Forces. I had seen Special Forces troops at Fort Bragg. I always admired them and thought what they were doing was quite unique and elite. So I had an opportunity now to join this new group. So I took the test, qualified, went the whole training, what we call 3 qualified Special Forces training, and went with the first contingency to Panama to set up the 8th group in Panama and stayed there over two years.
While you were there in Panama, I think that there was an incident.
Yes.
Yes, tell us about
Well,
that.
I was on in Special Forces. You're gonna have A team, B team, and a C team. Well, you all start off in the A team, but since it was in Central America, and yet although we took Spanish, I took 360 hours of Spanish in special training, but really you're gonna use the Latino soldiers are gonna be more valuable in Central America. So since I was crypto qualified, I was a cryptographer and in communication, and I was signed to a C team to work the comm center, communication center. And all of us in Special Forces have to have a security clearance. Of course, definitely work the communication center, you had to have a security clearance. And the protocol was, you go to the communication center, you sign a log, sign in. If you leave, you sign out. And that was the protocol. But the communication center was in the same building with the snack bar. And I had been there many times, 2 or 3 of us working, the sergeant in charge, we'll sign in, we'll go to the snack bar, get coffee, and come right back. We just go lock the door, vault, go down to the snack bar and come right back. And I'm sure that at some time, the warrant officer supervisor was aware of that. But anyway, on this particular Sunday morning, there was a plane crash in Peru, or one of the countries down in that area, and I was the only one working the communication center, and I had to go down, get the message, sign in, take the message to the duty officer. It was Fort Goulet was a very small post, but so the headquarters was about a block away from the building that the communication center was in. So I took the message and took it up to the duty officer. Coming right back to the comm center, I didn't sign out. In the meantime, the warrant officer came to the center, to the communication center. So I had signed in, but I was not in the vault, but I didn't sign out. So he made the move to revoke my security clearance. And if you revoke my security clearance, I'm out of the out of Special Forces, but surely out of communications. And happened to have a very good, decent deputy commander of the company I was in, West Point graduate, and he looked at the situation, quashed it. And I stayed, kept my security clearance, continued to work in the comm center. Now, out of that, there was a profound lesson I learned, and it has stayed with me throughout my whole career. And that is, whatever profession you're in, or whatever situation you're in, if there's a protocol to follow, make sure you follow it. Make sure you follow it. And so from that time on, no matter how familiar I became with individuals, how lax the environment may be around what I'm doing, I stay with the protocol. And then you have no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Leaving the military,
Yes.
you decided to attend Virginia Union
Yes.
University. What made that decision for you?
Virginia Union University is in Richmond, Virginia. I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. My wife graduated from Tuskegee. She's from Montgomery, Alabama. Her first teaching job was in Henrico County, right outside of Richmond, Virginia. I was in Panama. She graduated in in 65. I got discharged December 65, so her first teaching job in September 65 was in Record County. And so that's how I ended up going to college in Virginia Union.
Okay. What was your major?
History government.
What drew you to that subject?
I was always interested in history and government and how this country was put together. American history, primarily what I was interested in. Although I took a course in ancient history, took a course in philosophy and all the great political thinkers, but I'm more interested in American history, trying to learn how this country operated and how it was put together.
Did you have any mentors in college?
There were professors who were very nice, but one professor, Dr. Gale, who was a PhD, political science, dean, professor, open to students, and I was a little older student because I had been 6 years in the military, and so I would say that he was my mentor.
Did he encourage you to go
Yes.
to law school?
Well, he knew out of conversations that I had talked about going to law school, and that wasn't my goal. And I was going to law school, and so I had discussed it with him, and I'm sure I had. And when I ended up in Richmond, I stayed in the 19th Reserve Special Forces group for about a year and a half, because I had to work through college, and I had to work at night in the afternoon, and it became too much, so I only stayed in the reserve unit there for a year and a half. And all this time, of course, I was an enlisted man. I was a sergeant when I was discharged from Special Forces to go to college.
How long did it take you to finish college?
3 years.
You were pretty motivated.
Very motivated.
How did you decide?
And working pretty well full time.
Wow. How did you decide which law school?
Well, I wanted to go to Howard Law School because I only knew of two, Howard and Florida A&M. And that perhaps going to be others that, because these law schools were sending information to the colleges, and so that perhaps would be others that I would have applied to, but I knew about those two. And in my senior year, what happened was I started in February 66 and graduated in May 69. During that time, a lot of your major universities implemented or enacted what is called affirmative action programs. And that was to increase minority students' presence at the universities in different subjects. And George Washington University was one of those universities, the law school. And the Dean Potts, came to Virginia Union to explain their program and to recruit minority students. I went to the lecture or the whatever at the time he was talking about it, and was impressed with him. So I applied, and I had taken the LSAT, and my LSAT score was of average or close to what the average score was at the time. And about a week later, I got notice that I had been accepted and was going to have work study, free tuition, but work study. And that's the highlight of my life.
So you packed up the family, your young family in Richmond,
Yes.
to make that move to D.C.
Well, what happened was, after I had been accepted, yes, I did, but the summer between graduating from college and going to law school, I did an internship at the Department of Justice. And then that September, packed up my family, my wife and my daughter, you, and moved to Maryland to attend law school.
So let's go back to the Department of Justice then, where you worked for during the summer. What did you work on there?
I was an intern in the civil division, and basically did research and wrote memorandums and whatever that was assigned to me.
The Hatch Act, I think, is one of the ones.
That was when I was at the law firm, and
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
So then you packed up the family.
Yes.
Moved from Richmond to Maryland so that you could attend law school
Yeah.
in D.C., which is the epicenter of
Yes.
government,
Right.
An international place. But also during that time, D.C. was one of the flashpoints during the turmoil in the late 1960s,
Right.
protest over the Vietnam conflict.
Right.
You were definitely not in Alabama anymore,
Right.
or even in Virginia. What was D.C. like during this period?
Well, very competitive, and it's just like a small fish jump out of a small pond and jump into a large ocean, and you figure out how you're going to survive. And that's what I was. Surviving was not the question individually, but surviving in law school with a family was a question. So the military training I had received benefited me. The discipline I had received in pursuing whatever goal you had set benefited me, because it was tough.
First year in law school is never supposed to be fun. I remember that very clearly. It's a mishmash of strong performers from around the country, around the world. And for you, it was probably the first time in your education that you found yourself in classes with an overwhelming majority of white students. Was that an adjustment for you?
Yes, because all of my experience in education had been in a segregated system in Alabama through high school. Well, then in the military, and now at Virginia Union, my college was 98% black.
In HBCU?
HBCU, one of the oldest in the country. And now I'm in law school with all of these students who come from your major universities throughout the country, some of the better students in the world, and they chose to come to DC or GW because they wanted to be in Washington, and they perhaps could have gone to any university they wanted to. So yes, I mean, this is very challenging, and I knew that, and it was challenging.
How were you received by white students?
Well, received very well because I was no threat. I mean, everybody was there to further their education, not really concerned about who is sitting next to you. No threat. If it was undergrad, it'd been perhaps a different story. But this is a professional school now, so no problem.
What about by the faculty?
Well, the faculty were very, very good, and I'm sure the faculty had joined in the pursuit of affirmative action. I'm sure somewhere along the line they had passed a resolution or knew the university was doing and had to give their approval. And there were faculty members who were very genuine about the pursuit of giving other students that were non-traditional students for their university opportunity to come in. And the minority student that started with me, about 30 of us in the class of 500, and we were all from the South, Mississippi, Alabama, North Carolina, and Maryland, of course, is considered the South. So that's where we were from. And of course, the full student body was from all over the world. Yes.
Were there any law professors in particular that you admired?
Oh, yes. Monroe Freeman, who was one who was renowned throughout the whole legal profession. He was known for expert on ethics, and his claim to fame was that he had received his master in law from Harvard, I believe, at 19, had written books. In fact, he taught contracts, and that was one course he taught, and he used his book, and he wore it well. But he also was a guy you just admired and you want to be like. If you're going to be a lawyer, you want to be like Monroe Freeman. And he was very, very strict on lawyers' behavior and how they should behave and act in the profession. Then there was Professor Rothschild, who was another one who was very supportive, and Professor Harold Green, who taught constitutional law, and Professor Siderson, who was from Pittsburgh and had won the largest case verdict in Pittsburgh and in practice, and he taught evidence. And so, yeah, these were professors that you gravitated to because they were so open and helpful and welcoming to you, or to me, and the minority students.
I remember reading about Monroe Freedman in my law school class,
Yes.
because he was one of the architects of professional responsibility,
Right, sure.
and was just a very well admired
Yeah, sure.
ethicist.
Sure.
Yeah, and died just a couple of years ago,
Yeah,
I think.
right. He was teaching at Hosford when he died.
Yeah. So, how did you fare that first semester?
Well, this is the competition was just going to be great, and so my experience, like I say, had been at a segregated system. So, and my experience had been, if the professor give an assignment, you take the textbook, and you start on what page you said, page 1 through 50, and you just read the pages and every word on the pages, and that's what you discuss. Well, in law school, there are a whole lot of different ways to learn the subject. And that first semester, I didn't know there were other material that was ancillary to the textbook, that you can learn. And if you're an extremely good writer, you could take that ancillary material and pass these courses. And that's called Gilbert's and Cliff Notes. And if I had known about it, perhaps didn't have the money to buy them, but I didn't know about them. So that first semester, as you know, grades are posted not by names but by numbers.
Right.
So at the end of the semester, and whenever they say the grade's going to be posted, everyone go out and go to the bulletin board, to find their grades. And that first semester, I passed. I had about 1 B and a bunch of C's. Didn't make a D, and that was a major accomplishment in that competition.
Right.
But I decided, some of these students I noticed would be in class with us, and they'll disappear for about 2 weeks on vacation someplace, and coming back making these great grades, and I'm trying to figure out why is this, and it didn't take long for me to understand and acknowledge they had a better education than I had, and they were better writers than I was. So what I did then, I was a good thinker, but I was never known to be a great writer. And in law school, that's what gets you through. You don't have to be a great thinker if you're a good writer. That's just the opposite. So I figured out that Bernice, your mother, and my wife, was an English teacher. That was her major in college, and she was first-class English teacher. So I went and bought a blackboard, an eraser and crayon, and took it to the apartment. And when I would get home at night, she and I, because I had been out of academic setting for quite some time, remember? So she would go over sentence structure and subject and verb and those type of things with me. And that second semester, and I worked on that for a whole semester at night. That second semester, when we went down to the bulletin board to see the grades, I had some A's and B's. So what I learned is this: you have to acknowledge your weakness and work on it, and don't be ashamed of it. And that's what I did. That's what I did.
What about study groups? That's also.
I had study group. Yes, there were four of us in this. You know, near the end of the semester, you start pairing off with individuals. And there were four of us, about the same age, because four of them had master's degrees. Three of them had master's degrees. One was a captain in the Coast Guard on active duty. Another one has graduated from Stanford, had a master's degree, and had written a book and was coming to GW Law School to be in D.C. and, you know, to engage in greater things. Another one, father was president of a large bank in Philadelphia, and here I was. And we would meet, and near the end of the semester, we met at the guy in the Coast Guard apartment. He was married, and his wife was already a lawyer. And we were talking about the grades. If we got a low grade, what would we do? So, and it was in Monroe Freeman class, and the guy in the Coast Guard said, "Well, you know, he's in the Coast Guard. That's no problem." The guy from Stanford said he'll go to Israel and do work. The other fellow said basically he'll go back to Philadelphia and work in the bank. And my answer to all of them was, "Look, I'm coming back because I don't have anywhere to go," and so I got to complete this course. And so we all made passing grades, and that was a joyful thing to get out of Monroe Freeman class with a decent grade.
Right.
Now, he had that kind of reputation, but let me tell you, he was one fine, great professor, and very caring and all. He didn't flock anybody.
Did you end up working during your law school summers?
Yes, the first year I worked in the library, work study. The second year I got a job as a law clerk in one of the major law firms in Washington, D.C., Wall, Hochrader, Nicholson, and Ross, which was at DuPont Circle on 19th Street. A very small firm, about 15. All of the lawyers there were either from Harvard, Yale, Virginia, Yale Law School, Michigan. Harvard, Yale, Virginia, Michigan. And some of the younger, 3 or 4 of the younger ones that had come back from Vietnam was about my age. And so they treated me almost like an associate. You know, it wasn't looked upon as a law clerk, as sort of you part of the team. Although I knew I was not part of the team, but that's how they treated me. And so I would go back and forth, walk from George Washington Law School is located at G and 20th Street. And I would walk the block from the White House, 2 blocks. And I would walk from GW down to DuPont Circle and back to law school, take a course. In the afternoon, walk from DuPont Circle to law school, take a night course. Then your mother would pick me up 8 or 9 o'clock that night. So that's basically what I did.
Probably the first time that you really got to witness what lawyers do.
Oh, I learned from that firm, I learned how lawyers would think, how they talked, how they approached the law, how they behaved, especially in a law firm of that nature. Didn't see any clients because clients just didn't walk in, and these lawyers had what goes on in Washington with the major law firms and those who are at the top of the profession. They'll go to the government work, perhaps become a department head. They'll come out of government, join a major law firm, then go back into government to lead a department. And so they had the connection. And so I learned a lot about what I didn't know in the law. And I would stay in the afternoon after all of them were gone home, and I would read and and try to learn more about it.
As you approached the end of your time in law school, what area or specialty of law did you think you wanted to pursue?
Well, I always knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I wanted to do trial work. And as I was finishing law school, looking for a job, or thinking about employment, because now the only one working in the house is my mother, my wife. So I have to, be concerned about where I'm going to work. And I had some job offers, but I wanted to work for the Teamsters.
The Teamsters?
Yes, because I wanted to do labor law, and the Teamsters was basically the most powerful union around at the time, and I wanted to be part of working with that group. Yeah.
Well, you didn't go to the Teamsters.
No.
But I understand you received a surprise call during your last year with a job offer
Yes.
in Alabama.
Yes.
Can you share that story with us?
Well, I had always expressed I wanted to return to Alabama at some point. I had expressed that with when I did the internship at Department of Justice. I graduated from law school in February of 1972. So
That's after 2.5 years?
2.5 years.
Okay.
So our dement was the U.S. Attorney in Alabama, in Montgomery. He and Bill Baxley, who was Attorney General, came to Washington to the Department of Justice working on some desegregation case. And Bill Nelson, who I had worked for, who was the section chief when I worked as an intern, talked to mainly our dement about I wanted to return to Alabama. Basically told him about me as a person I had to. And Baxley, on the stand, said no, he wanted to talk to me. So I won't forget, it was a Thursday morning. I was in the library at the law firm and received a call, and the reception said, Bill Baxley, the Attorney General of the state of Alabama, want to talk to you. Well, I didn't know anything about Baxley because I had been out of Alabama for 14 years. And so I got on the phone, and he came on in his usual way and say, hey, I'm Bill Baxley, Attorney General of the state of Alabama. I heard about you. I understand you want to return to Alabama. I want to offer you a job. I want you to come to work in my office. Well, my ego then get hold of me. Well, you're the Attorney General of Alabama. You called me, and I haven't even applied. So now I don't have a job, haven't accepted a job, but your ego get hold of you. I said, well, fine. Let me think about it. So he called me back, and I said, well, let me send you my resume so see what you think. And I sent him my resume. But basically what happened was I didn't know the first thing about Baxley. I had been out of Alabama for quite some time. When he ran for Attorney General, he had been the youngest district attorney in the state of Alabama, down in Houston County, and now the youngest Attorney General in the history of the state of Alabama. And when he ran in '72, he told the black political leaders and made a commitment that if they supported him and he got elected, he would hire some black lawyers. Okay.
So there were no blacks in the Attorney General's
No
office
blacks
at
in the
that
Attorney
point?
General
Yeah.
at that point.
Okay.
So so I said, well, okay. In the meantime, I had an interview with Department of Justice, and excitement. I'm more excited about Department of Justice than I am about Bill Baxley, about the Attorney General of Alabama, because you get one shot at Department of Justice. I mean, that's it. And they hired on what is called exceptional service. You had to finish top in your class or top 20% or what have you. So I came for an interview, and I didn't know anything about Bill Baxter. I didn't know any lawyers in Alabama other than Fred Gray, Attorney Fred Gray, civil rights lawyer. So I went up to Macon County and spoke with Attorney Gray to tell me something about Baxter, and he satisfied my curiosity about what kind of person Baxter was and why they supported him. I talked to Dr. Joe Reed, who was president of the Alabama Democratic Conference, and I talked to him several times, and he told me what type of person Baxter was. So I went back to Washington. I had an interview with Baxter, with Bill Baxter at the Attorney General's office. And when I walked in the office, I knew immediately he was the person I wanted to work for and work with. His wife was Lucy Baxley. She was the administrative assistant. And he was there, he talked to me, and it was something about him that he convinced me that he was the new breed of the state of Alabama, the new leaders gonna lead this state into a new place. And just his personality and his honestness and the way he looked at things, and as we sat there and just talked, I knew I wanted to work for him. But I went back to Washington, and I got the call. I got the job offer from the Department of Justice. So I called him and told him that I had the offer from the Department of Justice. I had opted to go to the Department of Justice. He understood it, and he said, well, I understand that you only get one shot at the Department of Justice, but if you ever want to come to Alabama, come home, just give me a call. You always have a job. And that's what happened. And I went to the Department of Justice.
So, closing this loop on law school for just a second, you went from a terribly undistinguished first semester
Yes,
of law school to graduating in 2.5 years
yes,
with honors.
with honors.
That's quite an accomplishment.
Yes, hard work,
A lot of hard work.
hard work.
So after law school, you did join the Department of Justice. What division did you join?
Civil division.
Civil division. And what was the work like?
Well, the work was, it was exciting work, the group I was in, because President Nixon had established the stabilization program, which meant that you could, commonly called the wage price freeze program, you couldn't raise prices on any goods or entertainment or tickets or anything more than 5%. And if they did, it was a violation of the law. So it was 25 lawyers newly hired to overwork that program. And I was in that section.
Okay. So basically, you were receiving complaints then from the public regarding violation of
Right.
the wage price controls. Did you end up filing any lawsuits on
Well,
behalf?
as you stated, there were complaints sent to the Department of Justice. The one who received those complaints would then send them down to the section chief. The section chief then will assign different lawyers in the department to work on that complaint, either recommend it be closed or recommend you take action. Near the end of the program, end of my tenure there was a complaint sent in by a 12-year-old young boy from upstate New York who built and painted model airplanes
Okay.
as a hobby. And he noticed that those packages with 5 or 6 balls of different color paint had been increased more than 5%. And so he sent the complaint in. The complaint came down to department head. The department head sent the complaint to the lawyer in the office that I shared for him to close it out. He was on his way on vacation, the lawyer was, so he asked me to look at it and recommend be closed. I looked at it, recommended just the opposite, that we file a lawsuit. And I convinced the section chief that we do that. And we did.
Okay.
And so it generated the largest rollback on money that was received in the program. And the way that case was settled, which was another lesson to me, we got a call from the section chief one morning and said we have to go up to see the Attorney General on the 5th floor, John Mitchell. I had never been to the 5th floor and knew at Department of Justice. I don't know why I thought I should go to the 5th floor. But anyway, we went to the 5th floor and we walk in the Attorney General's office. And who do we find? We find a lawyer from Kirkland Ellis out of Chicago. And we find Abe Fortas, who had served on the United States Supreme Court, the lawyers for the company that we had sued. Mm-hmm. And the Attorney General simply told us, in essence, that the case was settled, and this the way it how it was settled. Mm-hmm. They had hired economists to figure out how many packages were sold. Mm-hmm. How do you make the reimbursement to the public? Mm-hmm. And the way they figured it out was to put an extra ball of paint in the package, and after so many were sold, they would reimburse the consumers by $350,000. Now, out of that, I learned this, that power and position goes a long ways in getting things settled. Because Abe Fortas and the lawyer from Ellis Kirkland had not talked to the section chief, and surely hadn't talked to me, the ones who were doing the work.
Right.
They went straight to the Attorney General in the Department of Justice main office and got the case settled, and he told us what to do. And, you know, I respected that. And then, but what I learned from that was powerful people in powerful positions can get things done. So we just have to be mindful of that and try to be a bulwark between using too much power to destroy things.
As we close this chapter, what lessons did you take with you, starting with the military on through college and then law school?
Hard work, perseverance, set a goal, be disciplined to stay the course. There were all kind of reasons why I thought about dropping out of law school or college, go back in the military. I was a sergeant. My wife was a graduate of college. And there were many reasons financially. You know, in college I worked as a janitor at Tallheimer department store in Richmond from 12 o'clock at night until 8 o'clock in the morning, and had a 9 o'clock class. And if I had to do hygiene, wash face and brush teeth at the department store, and many mornings walk from downtown on Main Street, walk to Virginia Union, which was at least 2.5 to 3 miles away. Some morning I could catch the city bus. It didn't take me directly to Virginia Union, it took me closer. But I had to do that. And you know, you walk through cleaning floors and bathrooms at night, figuring out why you're doing this. And it always come back to me, you always want to be a lawyer. You always want to be a lawyer. And that kept me going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then moving to chapter 3, The Seeker of Justice. I am reminded of one of my favorite quotes by Theodore Roosevelt.
Speak louder.
Justice consists not in being neutral between right and wrong, but in finding out the right and upholding it wherever found against the wrong. In 1973, your mom, who was still living in Montgomery, became ill. Did that lead to the family's decision to return to Alabama?
That was part of it. What happened is I finished law school, walked across the street with the next week and took the bar exam without taking the bar review course because I didn't have the money to take a bar review course. And I did not pass the DC bar. And the Department of Justice lawyers wanted me to stay there and take the bar again. I had the offer from Bill Baxter. I called Bill Baxter and asked him whether or not the job was still available. He said yes. How could he help me get here? Well, the salary was not that much, okay? And I told him I couldn't come to Montgomery on that salary. He said, well, we'll see if we can't supplement the salary. The next day, I got a call from Dr. Levi Watkins, the president of Alabama State University, called me and told me that Bill Baxter had called him and told him about me, that I wanted to return to Alabama, but the salary in the Attorney General's office was not sufficient for me to return to Alabama. And I had a job, if I wanted, as an adjunct professor at Alabama State, where I taught political science, the great political thinkers, for 8 years. And that's how I returned to Montgomery as the Assistant Attorney General in 75. No, 73.
73.
In the meantime, that was African American in the office.
Okay.
And that was Judge Thompson,
Okay.
the longest serving judge in this courthouse.
So you've mentioned before that you were a great admirer of Bill Baxley.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And tell us a little bit more what drew you to him and why you admired him so greatly.
Because he was one of those young white males that, as I understand it, participated in the civil rights movement at University of Alabama against Wallace standing in the door, against segregation, and participated on the right side. Plus, he convinced me, this is a new breed, and he just convinced me that he wanted to do great things for the state of Alabama and to move Alabama to another level. And I was just convinced of that. Plus, his personality was such that I wanted to be a national trial lawyer. And Baxter had a reputation of being one of the better trial lawyers in the state of Alabama when he was DA. And it was something about him, just a halo over his head and a glow about him and his personality and what he's talked about and what the approach he wanted to take in moving Alabama forward just convinced me that's who I wanted to work for, and that's where I wanted to work.
So often the Attorney General's office is really good preparation for leadership roles or political office. During your time there, you worked with a dream team of individuals who would eventually become the who's who among great leaders, lawyers, and judges in Alabama. Can you name some of the folks you worked with?
Well, as I said, Judge Thompson, Myron Thompson, who is the longest-serving judge in this courthouse. Judge Sally Greenhall, who became circuit judge in Montgomery County. George Beck, who was the deputy attorney general, who became U.S. attorney here. George Royer, lawyer up in Huntsville, well-known lawyer. William McKnight, another well-known lawyer. Judge McPherson, Vancetta McPherson, her husband Winston Durant, Hank Cadell, Julian McPhillips, Gil Kendricks, Davis, Milton Davis, Jock Smith. All of us came through the Attorney General's office, and they still serving, many of them are still serving out in the community in some capacity today. Yeah.
Great recognized leaders out there. What division were you assigned to?
Criminal division.
Criminal division. So tell us, what's a young black assistant attorney general in Alabama in the mid-70s doing traveling the roads of DeKalb County?
Well, I wanted to be an accomplished trial lawyer, and I was looking for work to establish that. And like I said, Bill Baxter was one who, if he hired you, he was going to send you where the need was and stand behind you. He would never go into the type of employer that would protect himself, always protect his employees. So there was a person who named Hammond, we call him Bozo Hammond, who was charged with embezzlement, I believe, and he was a department head, some department in the state of Alabama, and he was charged and indicted. And as I've been in DeKalb County, and there was a motion hearing, and I didn't know where DeKalb County was, but it's on the Tennessee border, and surely hadn't experienced, I can't say none, but surely not a host of black lawyers operating in that county. And he signed me and gave me a state car and signed me to go argue that motion. I didn't know what I was going to face, but I went up there and walked in the courthouse and courtroom, and the judge was so nice and so professional to me, I was surprised. He had just been appointed, Kenneth Randall Cole, who later became one of my best friends on the bench when I became a circuit judge. He was the circuit judge at the time. And I was successful in arguing that motion and came on back to Montgomery. And that was quite an experience.
Well, so you had that experience under your belt. So not too long after that, you were given an assignment that landed you in the newspapers in Alabama because you were the first to do this job. Now, I've heard some of this story from Mr. Baxley, but I want you to tell me your version of the story.
Well, whether you hear it from Baxter or me has gotten much longer and take us much longer to tell it now, but the substance is still the same. But what it had been expanded in the time to tell it. Yes, the district attorney in Escambia County had a heart attack, Mr. Henderson. And the law enforcement, the police chief, the sheriff, the clerk, and others in Escambia County called Baxley and asked him to send a lawyer down there to operate as a district attorney. Now Baxley they said send your top prosecutor and trial lawyer to operate as district attorney. Now that was under his authority and jurisdiction when a district attorney was incapacitated to assign someone to go and act as district attorney. And he called me in on a Friday afternoon and asked me that he wanted to send me down there as district attorney. He didn't tell me where. I didn't know where Escambia County was. He didn't tell me. But I knew and found out how to get there. And I said yes immediately. Yeah, I'll go. And so he signed me a car. And that morning, Monday morning, I drove to Escambia County. The main city is Brewton. Drove about 2-hour drive. Parked in front of the courthouse, walked in, went to the clerk's office, put my attaché case on the counter and said I was the new acting district attorney. And the clerk, Mr. Parker, turned ghostly white as if...
Hold.
Okay.
Coughing fit. Sorry.
That's fine.
I knew my allergies would get to me at some point. Sorry about that.
You doing all right?
I did well. Yeah, well, This is about my morning cough time. Okay, so you want to pick up with, you put your out-of-shape case down?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. I put my out-of-shape case on the counter. Parker, who was the district circuit clerk, turned ghostly white and said, "What?" You know, and as we started discussing that I was a new acting district attorney, still, obviously it's a shock to him because, like I said, they perhaps only seen one black lawyer in Escambia County, and that was A.J. Cooper from Mobile, perhaps had found some prison suit over there. And about that time, as we discussing and he objecting, the sheriff came to the clerk's office. The sheriff named Scotty Burns, one of the most admired sheriffs in the state of Alabama, admired by the people in Escambia County, all races, and also admired just and well known throughout the state. And he came to the clerk's office and heard the conversation. He told Parker no, because he had been one who had talked to Baxter, and I'm sure Baxter had told him who he was sending. So he said, no, he's the district attorney, and you're going to be treated accordingly. And so we left there and went up to the circuit judge's office, Douglas Webb, Judge Webb, and he, perhaps one had already talked to Baxter, or Baxter had talked to him, and he was likewise accommodating, said, no, you're the district attorney, we're going to extend everything down here for your, to do your job. And he put the word throughout the courthouse. And so I got the keys and went down to the district attorney's office and discovered that he did not have a secretary, because at that time, district attorneys, if they could type in these small areas, and if they typed their own indictments and pleadings, they could keep the fees that were generated from these different cases. And so I came back that Monday afternoon and told Baxter that I couldn't type, and if I could, I needed a secretary. He called state personnel, asked them for money, how to make arrangement to get me a secretary. They told him there was no way to do it under the rules. He said, well, break the rules and try to find some money for Price to hire a secretary. They did. I went back the next day, put the word out, I was looking for a secretary. That was a young lady had gone to college at A&M and was back in Escambia County at Brewton, and I hired her, paid her the highest amount they told me I could start at, kept the office open 8 hours a day, had preliminary hearings that Wednesday of the first week. Every lawyer in the county, whether they did criminal work or not, showed up at the courthouse. After the hearings, I never saw all of them together after that because my performance was so good, and really became very much admired and respected in Escambia County, and had no problem from that day on. And in fact, all of the lawyers really became good associates, some became friends.
So now I understand that initially when you went down there was basically a habit of just allowing individuals who may have been charged with a crime to just leave.
Yes, just to get them out of jail. I mean, without bond. That happened that Monday morning. When I first walked in the clerk's office, there was a white gentleman there who owned a pecan orchard, and one of his employees were. How this conversation started, one of his employees was in jail, had happened that Friday or Saturday night or over the weekend, and he came up to get him out to go to work. And I came in just at time and said, well, hold it, what is the bond? And he looked at me, and the clerk looked at me and said, well, there's no bond. I said, well, no, you can't release him. There has to be a bond. And by that time, the sheriff came in, and that's how that conversation started. And he couldn't just walk him out without putting up a bond, and all that was very new to them. And the clerk and The employer didn't know how to take it, but the sheriff stood behind me, and whatever the bond I set, that's what he had to make. Yes.
And during that first arraignment, did you have a visitor, I think, from another
Yes, what
county?
happened, Henderson had called a DA, a very popular DA from Henry County named Louis Stevens. And Louis was a very popular DA, just like Baxter was. And Henderson called him over to handle his docket. Well, he shows up that Wednesday morning and said he was acting district attorney, so I called Baxter and said, well, this Louis Stevens, the DA from Coffee County, is over here. I need to know who the DA is. Baxter got Louis Stevens on the telephone. Baxter knew him. They were good buddies in the National Guard. And so asked him, I understand, Stephen, what you doing over there? And he told him, he said, no, Price is the DA down there. And Stephen said, fine, I'll go back to Crawford County. Well, once I got that straight, that I was the acting district attorney, I needed Louis Stevens to stay there to help me out because I had not worked a grand jury by myself.
Okay.
And so for a week, he stayed there and helped me out in the case. Now, when I arrived, I understand there was calls made to Baxley that he would never get another vote out of Escambia County by appointing me acting district attorney in Escambia County. When I left 4 to 5 months later, there was a petition and a group came to Montgomery and asked Baxter to keep me there. You can't move our district attorney. That's what happened. And I have gone back several occasions, in fact, to do the Law Day speech for the bar, which is a grand affair now at Escambia County.
In fact, part of the story that Baxley tells is that the very same people
Yeah.
who called him initially and said, you will never get another vote in Escambia County for
Right.
sending that man down here, those are the people who then turned around and said, you will never get another vote in Escambia County if you take him away from us.
That's what I understand.
So why the turnaround? What kinds of things did you do?
I was competent. I was competent, effective. I went down there to do a job. I did the job in the best light, better than the district attorney had done the job. I kept the office open 8 hours a day. What was going on in Escambia County was there were very little child support payments primarily being made because the office was not open 8 hours a day. The single family mothers and women who were trying to get child support would come up to the office was closed. Henderson never made that a priority. I did. The fathers of these children will go over to Escambia County is on the Florida line. They'll work in Florida, come back, and it's gone, and wouldn't have to pay child support. And there's a system called ERISA that you file a petition in your county you're in and send it to a adjoining county wherever the father is. That judge will bring them in and to enforce the order from the judge in the county where the child is located. I enforced that, and a lot of the women started receiving child support payments and things of that nature, and that was the big part that was missing. The criminal cases you could handle, but those are kind of things that county was missing, somebody paying attention to just folks who got problems and need to can be resolved through the district attorney's office. I professionalized the office. Hired a secretary and kept the office open 8 hours a day, and people could come in, and that's why they wanted to keep me down there.
Just a couple of years into your work, then at the Attorney General's office, you made the move to the Montgomery District Attorney's office.
Yes.
Why did you leave, and what did you hope to gain in this new job?
Well, Jim Evans, who was the district attorney for Montgomery County, called me one Thursday morning and said that he wanted me to come to work for him. I talked to Baxter about it. he said, well, yeah, that'd be a good thing to go down to that courthouse and help prosecute those cases. So I came down to interview with Jimmy and discovered that he didn't have office space. At that time, the courthouse consists of Annex 1, and the district attorney had a part-time DA and one deputy district attorney. That's all I had. So there was an office for Jimmy, an office for a secretary, and for the chief deputy. When I got to the courthouse, there were a couple of lawyers he had hired. Some wouldn't take the bar, but they were out in the hall, had a desk in the hallway. So I talked to Jimmy. I liked Jimmy because I had heard he was in the same mode of a bachelor. In fact, he was well liked in the neighborhood I grew up in, Hunter Station, because his father owned a sand and gravel company in that neighborhood, and he was well liked in that neighborhood, visited all the homes, and my distant cousin became his surrogate mother. So Jimmy is one that I also wanted to work for and enjoy working for. So I told Jimmy that I was not a hall lawyer, and I went back to the Attorney General's office. And when he had an office for me, I will return. He called me that afternoon and told me he had an office. He had dislodged the chief deputy out of his office, and I showed up that Tuesday morning. He signed me in the office, and that's where I stayed for over 2.5 years.
What did you see as the advantage or the thing that you would really gain from moving to the DA's office?
Well, it was local, and it was everyday trial work, working at the level that you're meeting the people and associated with the victims of crimes, and more of in contact with the community. And that's what I enjoyed and wanted to do. And, the work was such that I wanted to be at a level where I could protect the innocent but prosecute the guilty and protect victims. I had witnessed how the last thing a black person wanted to do was go to the courthouse, okay? Because the treatment they had received. And I wanted to be in a position to help straighten some of that out, to help make it comfortable for them to come to the courthouse and try to get an answer to whatever problem they had or whatever they wanted to question. And also, I wanted to try to do something with all the crimes that were going on in the black community, not being prosecuted, not being pursued. I wanted to be in a position to try to help the victims in those kind of crimes.
Were there other blacks at the time in the DA's
No,
office?
no, I was the first black district attorney for Montgomery County.
Were there blacks on the police force?
Yes, there were blacks on the police force, but they were very few and basically limited to patrol.
Okay. How were you received in the courthouse by the judges there?
Well, a couple of judges thought the courthouse was going to fall down after I came to work, but there were a couple of judges that received it very well. Judge Emmett, very supported. Judge Hooper, very supported. Judge Marks, very supported. Judge Carter was part of that old scene, that old crowd with Judge Jones from the old plantation group. He was changing. He was not mean spirit to me, but I realized he hadn't quite gotten there. But Judge Thetford was still locked into the old plantation crowd and never changed.
Again, with the experience in the DA's office, you worked alongside individuals who would become very well respected all over the state.
Yes.
Who were some of those individuals?
Joe Espy, Judge Poole, who is now the circuit judge in Montgomery County, Barry Teague, who became the U.S. Attorney, Carrie Dozier, who was from Troy, who was successful in the DA's office, went back to Troy. He was a lawyer down there, and his father was well known with a lot of property, etc. Just assortment of lawyers, Sasser, George Wakefield, those guys who are now successful lawyers in Montgomery, Alabama.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago how much you really wanted to help those in the Black community. But often prosecutors are seen as the enemy.
Sure.
So what was that reception like in the African American community, and how did you work alongside the
Well,
community?
obviously, when I first started working at the DA's office, the African American community saw me as someone down there putting African Americans in jail. Well, what they didn't understand, the ones I prosecuted were guilty of a crime, and usually they were the victims of the crime that was committed. And so I didn't shirk from my responsibility in my job, but I was also protecting those who were falsely accused. And so the word finally got out and got around that here's a guy that knows what he's doing, number one. Number two, he's approachable. You go in to see him. He treats you with respect. Well, in the past, you had not received any respect. And so over a period, and there were some individuals who wanted change in this community, and they would spread my name out there, that and really would go to battle in defense of what I was doing. And some of the preachers of the largest churches were inviting me out to speak and special days and things of that nature, and it all worked out pretty good.
Historically, there has been tension between police departments and the African American community. Tell us about the Whitehurst case.
Whitehurst case, Whitehurst was a young man that was on his way home from work, had stopped to buy his wife some flowers, a gift of her birthday, and walking home in the area not far from this courthouse. There had been a robbery at a community store not far from this courthouse. The police was looking for the suspect and said that Whitehurst was the suspect, fitted the description of the suspect, which it later turned out he did not. And when they wanted to stop Whitehurst to talk to him, he started running away. And of course, that still happening today. Young black males don't want to be stopped by the police. And they shot him in the back, killed him, up here on Hawkins Street. And it turned out that the police on the scene admitted they had shot the wrong person. And they didn't want to admit that, but there was a local lawyer, Donald Watkins, who was hired by the Whitehurst family to represent them, and he started investigating the case and finding witnesses. And one of the witnesses that he found that had given an affidavit saying that Whitehurst was a suspect, and he heard the police tell Whitehurst to stop and drop the gun. Donald Walker found out that that person was in jail in another county on that day and obviously couldn't be where he said he was. And another witness came up and on the oath and said that he heard the police say they shot the wrong witness, the wrong man. Now the point was, though, after they investigated the case and realized they had shot the wrong person and shot him in the back, the police department got in control mode and see how we're going to rectify this. So one of the lieutenants, Lieutenant Humphrey, who up until that time had been a investigator that I respected. He went to the police department, got a pistol that had been put at the police department from a prior case, fired it and planted it on Whitehurst as if that's the gun that Whitehurst had. It turned out to be bogus. Whitehurst was shot and killed unnecessarily, had not committed any crime, etc. That case shocked the city. Mayor Robinson, who was a decent progressive mayor, had resigned. The police chief, Ed Wright, resigned. That's when Chief Swindler came on. Several police officers lost their jobs. Some resigned because they just couldn't participate in what had happened. Jim Evans, I was in the DA's office. We worked the case, grand jury, indicted 3. They tried 1 mistrial.
These
and
are police officers?
Yes, and just didn't try the other 2. And Whitehurst lost a civil suit over some technicality, and the family has not been compensated, as far as I know, to today.
What did Whitehurst teach you?
Well, it taught me that there was still just unfairness and prejudice, and we had a long way to go to try to reconcile the difference in respect between the black community and the police, law enforcement, which is still going on today, which I still play a part trying to reconcile between the two, that gulf that exists. And I sure hope one day that we be able to bring that two together. And I think we're making a great deal of progress on it. Yeah.
I remember when I was in 7th grade, my class went on a field trip to the courthouse. And we were sitting in the jury area in Judge Emmett's courtroom. He came in and said, "I am waiting for a gentleman to come in to address you. He's a superior deputy district attorney. He is so tough, we call him Black Death." Then you walked in the room and surprised me because I had never heard that term referring to you. Where did Black Death come from?
I was called several names, and one was, and the reason for that is that because in the courtroom, and I did not trivialize what I was doing. In other words, I didn't play. I meant business when I decided that a case was worth trying. Well, it wasn't competition of winning or losing, because I don't think a DA should be in that kind of position. It's a matter of doing your job, and if the facts are there and you do your job and do it right, usually the jury will do, hopefully, what they should do. And I didn't engage in jokes. I didn't engage in trivial type things. I was very serious about my job and what I was doing. And so I was called Black Death. I was called an SOB. I was called God reincarnated as being black. So I would call a lot of things. And I honor that. I mean, when people start calling your names, you must be doing something. And you're doing your job. And so that didn't bother me. In fact, I sort of enjoyed it,
Yeah. I remember that day you sort of enjoyed it.
Yeah, right.
Talking about it.
I prosecuted the major cases, the murders, rapes, robberies. And then we had some sensational cases that I participated in and prosecuted. And obviously, and the defense lawyers wasn't going to like that. But they all end up being my friends. But they'll call you all kind of names, and I enjoy some of the names they call me.
So now you left the DA's office in 1977. What were your reasons for doing so?
I went in private practice. I had done basically established what I wanted to establish, and went into private practice.
And you became mostly a defense attorney,
Yes.
which is interesting. It seems like a contradiction because you had focused so much of your career up until that point in being a prosecutor.
Yeah.
And now you have become a defense attorney. Was it difficult for you to make that
No,
switch?
it's not a contradiction because as a defense attorney, I would only defend individuals if I thought they had a defense or were not guilty. And there were certain cases that I would not defend, although the accused was entitled to a lawyer, deserved a lawyer. Every accused deserved a lawyer, but I would not defend rape cases. I would not defend child molestation cases. Those kind of cases, I just didn't defend. But mainly, in addition to the criminal practice, I had a thriving civil practice.
Okay. And 2 years into that private practice, you became really the city's first black municipal
Became the
judge?
first city black municipal judge, Mayor Emery Former, who had fought in military background, had fought in Korea, had been a paratrooper, and he knew I had been a paratrooper in Special Forces, and we would always greet each other along those lines. And he called me one day and said that, I always told you that, and I don't remember him telling me, but if there was something I thought you'd be interested in, I'll appoint you. And I got a judgeship open down here, and see what you're interested in. Well, I said, well, send me the application. Sent the application. There were 9 persons on the city council. He said, I got you 7 votes. He did. I was appointed the first black municipal judge in the city of Montgomery.
Okay. Speaking of the military, you never really left the
Right.
military, did you?
No.
So you were still a member of the reserves?
Well, once I moved back to Alabama, since I had 7.5 years, I didn't want all that time to be wasted. I rejoined the reserves here in Montgomery, applied for my direct commission in JAG Corps, Judge Advocate General Corps, was commissioned in 76 or 77, first lieutenant. I was called back to active duty as a first lieutenant to defend National Guard major who the state of Alabama and the military wanted to take his commission before a panel of 5, 3 full colonels and 2 lieutenant colonels. David Burns was his civilian lawyer. I was his military lawyer on active duty by the Department of Justice, by the Department of Defense. Tried the case for a week, and he was acquitted. And we kept his commission, kept him on active duty, kept him in the reserves.
When did you ultimately leave the reserves?
In '92, but basically what happened, once I was commissioned, I then, in JAG Corps, and I also had a branch in quartermaster. So I was deputy commander of units, commander of a couple units, and then I became the SJA for the reserve headquarters of 375th Field Depot, and ended up retiring Lieutenant Colonel.
Okay. When
So going from a private to lieutenant colonel is pretty good.
it's not bad, is
Not
it?
bad.
As we enter the early 80s, then, you have practiced as an attorney for about a decade. Had your thoughts about the law, justice, and fairness changed since law school?
Well, I saw my role as one who tried to help bring about change. It's no good just to complain and to make statements just to get press and get your name out there. You have to do something to try to bring about the change. And that's why I became a prosecutor. That's why I worked for the Attorney General's office, to get inside, if you got an opportunity, see if you can help bring about some changes or what you say you're concerned about. And so, yes, I was had effected some change in Montgomery, had created an atmosphere or culture of trust now between the community and some aspect of the police department. There had been some changes in the police department, although we had a big case later that put some damper on that. But yes, and that's always has been my philosophy and still my philosophy. If there's something out there that you know not right, and you're in a position to make some sacrifice, if it's called sacrifice, to make some change, to try to bring about reconciliation between people and the system, you should do that.
So April 4th, 1983,
Yes,
you were appointed to the circuit court by none other than Governor George Wallace.
yes,
There's a story there.
yes.
Please share that story.
Well, Governor Wallace was the governor, and he had been shot and was very ill. And his last race for governor, he met with the black political leaders, particularly those who worked with Alabama Democratic Conference. Some from outside of Alabama. I understand Jesse Jackson was part of the group that went to see him. He called them to come see him, and that he had repented or whatever, was sorry for what some of the stuff he had done. And if they supported him, he would appoint some registers, voter registration folks in the Black Belt counties. And that's what they were really working for. And they supported him and elected him. And he appointed some black registers. What happened was his son-in-law, who was married to his oldest daughter, Peggy, Mark Kennedy, who ended up just being a fine judge and a wonderful member of the Supreme Court, was a law clerk, and a position became open at juvenile court and a circuit. Had become the county judge, and a position became open for a circuit judge in the juvenile court. And he said he wanted that position. And so members of the bar here, including myself, wrote letters and supported him for that position, and Wallace appointed him to that position. Well, Judge Hooper was in his last term, and he got reelected. As soon as he got his retirement, he said he was going to retire, but he was not going to retire unless I was appointed, because I was overly qualified for the job, and that's in the newspaper. Now, this is in 1983. And then later Justice Kennedy said he wanted that position because it was a circuit judge of general jurisdiction. And so we basically told him he couldn't have all the positions. So anyway, the local paper started writing editorials about criticizing Wallace about appointing his son-in-law and not appointing Price. Now, I don't know whether he was so much concerned about me or he was just critical because his family member was getting all these appointments, and Mark Kennedy was his son-in-law. But in any event, that went on for a while. And there was a circuit judge named Sam Taylor, who at one point had been in the legislature and was Wallace's floor leader, and he was a circuit judge. But he always said he wanted to be on the Court of Appeals. So when Judge DeCarlos retired, that was open on the Court of Appeals. They asked him, did he want the position? He said no, because he was circuit judge in the courthouse. He enjoyed being circuit judge. Make a long story short, they didn't accept that, so they called him up to the governor's office one Friday morning, offered him the job. He said he didn't want it. Didn't matter, they swore him in anyway. Brought Mark Kennedy up there the same morning, swore him into Sam Taylor's position. That left Judge Hooper's position open, and a couple of weeks later appointed me circuit judge. That's how that happened.
There's always a story.
Yeah.
There's always a backstory. So you were the first African American on the bench in Montgomery.
Oh, yes, yes.
So I'm sure that there were a whole lot of emotions, a range of
Yeah.
emotions about that appointment. Did you feel that you were writing a part of history at that point?
No, I just felt it was another job and another position, and I deserved it. And the local bar, many of the major lawyers in the bar supported that. Okay, and so no, I have never felt inferior or not up to the task. It's just another position.
But surely you felt something because this was the first time an African American was now going to be sitting on the bench in what many people call the cradle of the
Well,
Confederacy in Montgomery, Alabama.
Given the opportunity, it was my responsibility to do that. To do that, and it was not done because of the salary, because the salary was not very good at that time, and I had a thriving law practice. So to answer your question, it was done out of commitment to help bring about a change.
Okay. So going into that appointment, did you have a vision or a set of goals regarding your role on the bench?
Well, they had a couple of young judges, Judge Thomas and Judge Miller, and I felt that we could make some amends for some of the bad stuff that happened.
Okay. So you mentioned Judge Thomas and Judge Miller. How were you received by your colleagues?
Oh, fine. You know, no overt rejection.
Okay. It's been said that you, almost from day one, were really a true lawyer's judge. What does that mean?
Well, I enjoyed being a lawyer. I hope that every lawyer enjoyed being a lawyer. So I was not the type of judge that once I sent it to the bench, that then I was going to act like I hated lawyers or didn't dislike lawyers. I enjoyed lawyers coming before me, representing their clients, and I was always open to help them, always open to accommodate them. That was what they had trained to do, and I was not going to make it difficult for them. The law was already difficult for you anyway, that you don't need me to be difficult or try to figure out what side of bed I got up on every morning to determine any personality that I was going to have that day. No, that wasn't what you should face. You should be able to come in and do the kind of job that you have been trained to do. And I should be a consummated judge with all that goes with that to accommodate you.
I understand almost from day one also, you emphasize the importance of dress and
Yes.
decorum in the courtroom.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I believe very strongly in that. I implemented a dress code posted on all of the doors in the courthouse, and it basically said that women could not wear spaghetti straps or halter blouses where half of the mid-body showing, flip-flops or shorts. Men could not wear tank tops, shorts and flip-flops and things of that nature. And the reason for that, I truly believe that sometimes people can be judged guilty by their appearance. And I didn't want that to happen to anyone, in particular in my court. And so if I could help you improve your presence, your appearance, I think it was incumbent on me to do it. Plus the respect. It's just a matter of respect. A lot of people you have to, I learned as a municipal judge, that's where you really cut your teeth. in city court, because every Monday morning you got the same folks coming with the same old crime and all, and you finally realize there's just some people you got to take care of, and they didn't need to go to jail, and you're just spending money, wasting money, and particularly those who gonna get drunk and then gonna curse at the police, gonna go to sleep in some abandoned house, gonna urinate on the wall downtown. Just those kind of crimes that just keeps you busy. And there were some people that had some mental issues that you just knew that, look, instead of putting them in jail, I just got to take care of these folks, okay? And so I didn't want people to, I didn't want anybody convicted because the jury, and we have we have opinion of folks. We can say we're on jury duty and we can be fair and all that, but yeah, listen, you form an opinion sometime when the person first walk in and it doesn't leave you. So I just wanted to make sure it wasn't the price of the clothes. No, that wasn't what it was about. It was what was the proper dress to come to court, a very serious encounter. One of the places that you would hope next to church that you be treated fairly was the court. And I just didn't want people to, anyone to be convicted because of dress. Jewelry that just for show too much, I didn't want anybody to be convicted because of that. And it was well received. Now, the law enforcement didn't have to enforce that because that was not their job. The judges had to enforce that. And I had at least half a dozen individuals that you don't embarrass them in open court. You call them up, tell the lawyer to come up. You go in the jury room and you tell them, look, you're not dressed appropriate for court. How long would it take you? Where do you live? How long would it take you to go home? Put on some long pants or a different shirt, and they'll tell you. And if you didn't think, since I was from Montgomery and knew about the distance, and if they were nervous and say, I'll be back in 20 minutes, I know it's going to take you an hour. I said, no, you have an hour, and I'll be here. But you go back and dress appropriately. And I used the old adage, the old common sense saying that I heard that Bear Bryant used to use, the coach of Alabama. And whether it's true or not, he used to, with difficult players, he would bring their mothers down and put the mothers in the stand, give them a ticket and put them in the stand, and tell them to go play for your mama, okay? And they usually behaved well and played well, and that's why a lot of these athletes who come from single-family homes look up in the stands and I'm playing for my mama, So I would just tell them sometime, did your mama know you were leaving home dressed like that? They said, no, well, go home and change and make your mama proud. Or something like that. And I never had one who rejected or resented it. In fact, they all, in the end, appreciated what I did. And some teachers wrote, wanted a copy of the order. I got letters from judges in other states wanting orders of the copies of the order. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 33 years, you have tried hundreds of cases, both criminal and civil. We can't possibly cover them, or even a significant number of them in this period of time that we have. But let's talk about a few that really stick to your bones. Let's start with death penalty cases.
Yes, death penalty cases, yeah.
How many death penalty cases have you tried or overseen?
I've tried several capital murder cases, which would be death penalty qualified. But I only sentenced 3 to the death penalty.
What was your first one?
The first one was, I believe it was Bowie, Dwayne Bowie, who was a Vietnamese who, after Vietnam ended, found his way to America. Hard-working fisherman, end up in San Francisco, New Orleans, Mobile, there in Montgomery. And everything about him, and everything everybody said about him, he was just a hard-working individual. And he married an American woman who, after a period of time, started cheating on him. And he couldn't take it. They had two young girls, and 6, 7 years old, in that range. And the wife left him for another man, as I recall. And the point is, it was a dysfunctional family. And he then explained that he couldn't stand to have his children reared by someone else or by her. And in his country, that's what I understand, he told law enforcement, take their life and they all meet again in heaven. Whether he called it heaven, I don't know. Anyway, he dressed them up in their finest clothes, laid them on the bed, slit their throats, and they died.
The daughters.
The daughters. He slit his arm and he laid down beside them, maybe to commit suicide. That's what the theory is. And someone came in before he died. We tried that case, and the jury, in Alabama, it had to be 10 votes in order to sentence somebody to death. It doesn't have to be unanimous. It can be 2 against, but it must be 10 in order to sentence to death. And there's an advisory opinion from a jury in Alabama. Judge can overrule their opinion, their verdict on the sentence. And I sentenced him to death, and because I think the case deserved death.
Did the jury advise death?
Yes. It was, I think it may have been unanimous. But anyway, and it deserved that, okay? Although you sympathize with him and understand the culture difference and all of that, and I authorized the lawyers to go to Vietnam and to prepare for the case and the sentencing phase, to all about his background and all of that, so to make sure he got a fair trial. And the case was affirmed by all appellate courts in Alabama. As I recall, it was affirmed by the United States Supreme Court and cited in a couple of cases. And of course, the lawyers then on habeas corpus end up in federal court, and the federal judge set it aside under what's called Batson. Batson was a case, Batson versus Kentucky, that raised the question of jury qualification and violation of the Constitution to strike minority judges, jurors, what it was happen, unless they're just race neutral. And the federal court found that that had not been done in that case, although I think it had. But reversed the case, and we had to retry him. And that jury on retrial, I think we retried him or pled, recommended life sentence, and he's serving it now, life without parole. He's still alive.
He's still alive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another was Raymond Brown, that had killed 3 of his family members in North Alabama, killed his grandmother, his wife, and his aunt. Brutal killings. And he was sentenced to life in the penitentiary before the death penalty with killing more than one person was enacted. And he had served quite a few years, and as long as he was in the penitentiary under male supervision, there was just absolutely no problem. I mean, just as docile and everything. And he was paroled and attempted to kill a lady and string a lady in Atmore, okay? He didn't kill her, but his role was not revoked. And he ended up in Montgomery, dating a lady out here in North Montgomery. And over a card game they were playing, I don't recall all the facts, but ended up killing her in the same way he killed his family members, with a knife, and left it embedded in her stomach. I sentenced him to death. I talked about that case at a seminar at Yale Law School. But anyway, he died before before he was executed. The third one that person was executed was Tory McNabb. Tory McNabb was a young black male that stole a car and had an accident over on Cleveland Avenue in front of Beulah Church. Police officer Anderson was on lunch break and had been to see his mother. And he was the type of police officer that if you're talking about one who worked in the community and had respect of the community, he was one of those types. And he came upon the accident because it was not far from his mother's house and the route he had to travel. And the only thing he did was got out of his car to start investigating the accident, and Tory McNabb just started shooting and killed him. And just a horrible crime. Tried it, and he was convicted, and sentenced him to death, and he was executed.
Sometimes it must be hard to have faith in humanity when you try cases and you hear about some of the heinous acts that people commit against one another.
No, yes. Well, you know, I believe the death penalty is appropriate in some situations. And I've seen cases so heinous, so atrocious, so depraved until there's no explanation I can come up with why society should keep them alive. I'm pro-life, but and I think life is sacred to me, and the sanctity of life is important. But there are some crimes that people commit that I can justify, which I have, and don't apologize for it, sentence a person to death. Now, I wouldn't go around bragging about it. I don't, you know, go around, I'm not gleeful about it.
No.
But that's what you have to do.
You can make that decision.
I can make that decision.
Tell us about Todd Road.
Well, shortly after I was appointed to the bench in '83, Todd Road was out in North Montgomery, was a major case here in Montgomery that still, the shock waves from it still reverberate throughout the community. It was a poor neighborhood, and a lady died. And her children and family members were up north in Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, maybe or some other states. And they came for the funeral. And after the funeral, before they getting ready to leave to go back, they all drove and had what you call large cars, Cadillacs and Lincolns, and those large cars. And somebody tipped off the police who were in plain clothes, two of them, Spivey and I forgot the other person's name, in plain clothes and a plain police car, that all these cars were at this house on Todd Road in Madison Park, and something amiss or something nefarious or a criminal had to be going on, because it had to be a dope deal or something. They didn't know the person had died. So Spivey and his partner drove by the house, and as they were driving by the house, a young black male was coming out of the house to go to one of the cars. They stopped and called him to talk to him to find out what's going on. He started running, went back in the house. They got out of the car and chased him in the house, and a fight ensued and all, and all was shot, and one of the person was shot, and they charged all these people with criminal cases. And they hadn't done anything. I mean, they're just there at the house. And I had just been appointed to the bench, I guess about 4 or 5 months, about 3 or 4 months. And the case was tried, and all the visitors were indicted. And representing these visitors was Attorney Solomon C., retired U.S. Magistrate Judge Vancetta McPherson, Johnny Hardwick, who is circuit judge now, and Troy Massey. And Randy Thomas was a young judge right across the hall from me. Jim Evans was the prosecutor, and I'm over in my office right across the hall, and where I was not directly involved in the case, because the case assigned to Thomas, the truth of the matter was, I was directly, because Jim Evans, as they're discussed across the hall, would come over to my office and get my opinion, discuss it with me. And it was a terrible situation. And it finally worked out where the settlement was, and I don't think defense lawyers really want to accept it, but the settlement was one or two of the visitors would pay a fine and plead to misdemeanor, and the rest of them go home, and that's what happened. But that case still reverberates throughout the community now. When you said Todd Road, they remember how terrible that was, yes.
And they remember it because of police taking action?
Taking action.
Okay.
When the people were innocent and just assuming because Cadillacs and Lincolns and whatever parked there, something is going on, and you have no probable cause, because you have no information that anything dope or anything else is going on. Yeah.
Wow. Well into your second decade on the bench, you had one of the most high-profile cases of your career that grabbed the attention of the country.
Right.
This case dealt with the display of the Ten Commandments in a courtroom and opening court with prayer.
Right.
Tell us about that case.
Judge Roy Moore, who was a circuit judge in Etowah County, he had been assistant DA, West Point graduate, had fought in Vietnam, had been assistant district attorney, had run for district attorney, was defeated, but some way had either got appointed circuit judge or he had won a position as circuit judge. Well, he had hand-carved plaques of the Ten Commandments, okay? And he was opening court as the jurors would come in, the pool would come in. He was opening court with a prayer. And what he was doing, he was using the same two Baptist preachers, I believe, who were friends of his, to do the prayer. Well, two women who worked in the clerk's office and members of the Free Thought Society filed a lawsuit against Judge Moore, and he had placed a copy of the Ten Commandments on the wall of the jury box in the courtroom. And two women worked in the clerk's office, and members of the Free Thought Society filed a lawsuit against him, and it was in federal court, Judge Pross, I think, and ACLU representative. And Judge Pross dismissed the case on the ground that these individuals had no standing to file the lawsuit because they were not summoned to jury duty. They didn't have to go up to the courtroom, and they were not by compulsion, by subpoena, to be there. And that's true. And so Judge Moore, who wanted to keep this going, said, no, you know, we got to get this resolved. So he came to Montgomery and got Governor Favre James and Jeff Sessions, who was the Attorney General, to file a lawsuit for declaratory judgment. The question was whether or not what he had done was constitutional. And the mistake they made, they list Judge Moore as one of the defendants, okay? Mm-hmm. So the case was assigned to me. And I had hearings on the case. A lawyer from Wyoming from an organization called the Call Society came all the way from Wyoming to defend Judge Moore. Judge Moore and his law clerk, who had written a book called God and John J. Treat or what have you, the defender, Judge Moore. They went up to, got Harvard, and they spent a lot of money. They got Harvard to replicate and copy all the volumes of Blackstone, okay? Mm-hmm. And they brought them down here. And so, you know, I could tell when something's done for publicity, and when you're serious about what you're doing. If you're going to introduce the whole volumes of Blackstone, so I want to know what part of Blackstone you want me to read. And so I asked him that, what part you want me to read? I want you to read the whole thing. Well, the whole volume of Blackstone had nothing to do with this case, but anyway, you listen to that. And so I had the hearing. There was a demonstration around the courthouse, and people came from Etowah County, school kids, and surrounded and threats on me and on my life. And I had security at my home, and I believe you were there at the time. Were you there?
No,
Okay.
actually, I was told, I was in Seattle, and
Okay.
I was told not to come
Yeah,
home
right.
because of the death
Well,
threats.
anyway, I had, for about 2 weeks, I had security 24 hours a day. My wife would go to the store and all, she had to have security. But, you know, I had the hearing, listened to what they were saying, and I wrote an order that he had to cease and desist from opening court with a prayer. Before he opened court, he could have church in the courthouse if he wanted to, okay? And I think I put that in order. I mean, you could do what you want to. But once you open court and everybody in the courtroom now is there by subpoena, and they can't just get up and leave, it's violation of the Constitution, okay? On the Ten Commandments, I ducked out, to be honest with you. I wrote an order that it appeared that he had displayed the Ten Commandment plaque in a constitutional way, because there was a picture on the other wall over there of some George Washington, for example, George Washington crossing Delaware. And the law is you can display the Ten Commandments in a government building if you display it with other constitutional and educational documents.
Historical documents,
Historical
too.
documents. So I didn't want to say that he couldn't do the commandments, so I ducked out. And Judge Moore said, no, Judge Price, and I said was not promoting religion. Moore had a press conference in Birmingham and said, Judge Price is absolutely wrong. I am promoting religion. And they are not up there with other historical documents. So I said, well, then maybe I need to go up there and see. So I got the sheriff to authorize a deputy to carry me to Etowah County. The sheriff at Etowah County had a deputy meet us at the county line and escort me on to the courthouse. And in the hallway of the courthouse, there were people singing and threatening me and all of that, destroying the Ten Commandments. How you going to destroy the Ten Commandments? They handed down by God. But anyway, so I met with Judge Stewart, the presiding judge, Judge Ray, and other judges in the courthouse. And I told them, I said, look, get Judge Moore to put the Declaration of Independence, copy of the Constitution on each side of the Ten Commandments. I'll go back to Montgomery and they say, no, he's not going to do it. This is an issue that he's going to run for on, and he's not going to do it. And in the courtroom where the jury box was, it's a small courtroom in Etowah County, and the Ten Commandments sort of intruded out on you. So I said, well, he's not going to do it. So I came on back and said, well, I got to do my duty now. So I sat there and mulled over what, how to write this order. And I thought about Judge Frank M. Johnson, who desegregated the whole South and was barred from entering First Baptist Church over here and never went back to church over there because the deacon stood in the door and barred him from coming. And his home was bombed and all, but yet he was committed to the Constitution and doing his job. And I thought about Dr. King, all that he was going through and the threats on his life and the sacrifice he was making. Why in the world should I duck out on writing the order that I know is right? So I wrote an order, one-page order, that Judge Moore, all he had to do, it could be done in 30 seconds, was to display other historical documents around the Ten Commandments. They can stay. Otherwise, he would have to remove them, if not be held in contempt of court. That is what the law says, okay? Now, he appealed, and the Court of Appeal Supreme Court dismissed the appeal because, on a technicality, because what they said was there was no controversy between the parties, because Judge Moore came and got Governor James and Attorney General Sessions to file a lawsuit, and he is a party to the lawsuit, but he listed as a defendant. So since you have come and participated in filing this, where's the controversy between you all? Okay? So that's how the case was, the appeal was dismissed. That's when Moore later got elected to the Supreme Court, put his monument up there, and Judge Thompson here ordered that it be removed. And who was the prosecutor and removing him from the bench? Bill Pryor, who is now the presiding judge of the 11th Circuit, who defended him in my case and sat in my office and said, I know it's against the law, but I got to do what I got to do. So I'm just saying that's what happened. And you know, so nobody was trying to keep Judge Moore from, recognizing God and practicing religion. That was never the case of that.
So then shortly after your ruling, you were in the middle of a trial.
Yes.
And you received a phone call from Boston.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
I was presiding in the tobacco cases, the litigation. And I was on the bench, and I received a call from Boston. My secretary came in to get me and told me that Caroline Kennedy, secretary, was on the phone. Can I come in and take the call? I said yes. I went in and talked to her, and she told me that Ms. Kennedy would like to speak to me, and would I be available to accept the call. And I sort of didn't want to show how giddy I was, and so I said, yes, I'll be happy to accept the call anytime she called. About 45 minutes later, Caroline, my secretary, came in and told me Caroline Kennedy was on the phone. And I went in and accepted the call, and Ms. Kennedy said, Judge, I'm called and pleased to tell you that you are the recipient, 1997 recipient of the Profile and Courage Award. And I was so elated, and I almost was speechless. And I told her thank you, and she wanted to know could I come to Boston to receive the award, and I assured her I could. And that was what happened. I went back on the bench, and I was so happy about it, I called a recess and called several of the lawyers who were practicing Montgomery, and I knew very well, to the bench and sidebar, and told them I had just got notice and that I was a recipient of the 1997 Profile and Courage Award. One of them went out and had a press conference and announced it.
Announced your news.
Yeah, announced my news, which I was supposed to keep secret and allow the library in Boston to give the news. And he put it out there before they did.
Well, sometimes those things happen.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
So tell us, what exactly is the Profile and Courage Award?
well, first of all, I didn't know that it existed. A friend of mine, John Young, who was also in the Attorney General's office with me, and we continued to be friends afterwards, knew about the Profile and Courage Award. During the Roy Moore Ten Commandment case, he was sending clippings, newspaper clippings and articles to the foundation about the case. And I understand the committee took great interest in the case because it was controversy in this area and expanded beyond this area. And I understand that members of the committee became interested in knowing more about the case. And some on the committee called individuals in the state of Alabama. I understand Senator Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, called Chief Justice Heflin. I understand someone on the committee called Morris Dees and called someone in in Mobile, etc. And they told them that John Siegenthaler called someone he knew in Alabama, and I understand they were told that this case was newsworthy all over the country, and it was very controversial. And that's when they started concentrating on who to award the Profile and Courage Award to, 1997. Understanding they were leaning toward or had made a decision to award to John Lewis for his work in civil rights. Mm-hmm. They changed that, awarded me the award in 97, and about 2 years later awarded John Lewis for a Lifetime Achievement, the award.
So who typically is the recipient
Yes.
of this award?
You have to be an elected official that deals with an issue that of some consequence to society, that will cause you, as an elected official, could cause you to lose an election. And you have to show courage to withstand the pressure, the fear of losing, and do the right thing, and withstand the pressure and the fear of losing your position. And they make an assessment, the committee does, and then decide who to give the award to.
I think I remember hearing the committee was particularly impressed with the volume of threats,
Yes.
of hate mail,
Right.
you know, the levels to which the Alabama Bureau of Investigation had to go and protect
Right.
your family because there were so many credible threats.
Right.
And it extended all the way to me in
Yeah.
Seattle because I was told not to come home during that period.
Well, basically, it was the sheriff department and the local police department.
Yeah. So the threat was real.
No, the threat was very real. Like I said previously, I had security 24 hours a day around my house, and wherever we would go, we had security to escort us and to be with us, and it was very serious. And I took it very serious. I may put on the appearance of being very brave, but I was concerned about my family.
So up in Boston, you were awarded this lantern, which is a symbol of the Profiles in Courage Award.
That is the lantern.
And so I will read this for you. Profile in Courage Award presented to Judge Charles Price in recognition of his distinguished public service and the example he has set of political courage in American public life.
Right.
What does this lantern mean?
I understand that it was designed by Caroline Kennedy Husband, who's an architect. And as in discussion with him at the ceremony and other members of the Kennedy family, it's a beacon of hope. It's a light to the world, and it is to give people hope in a better society, and that they can believe that the world is not as dark as it appears, and that would be better times to come.
Great. Every time I come over to your house, I love looking at it as it catches the light in your living room.
Right.
So you came back from Boston.
Yes.
But you were still in the middle of some tobacco litigation.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, the tobacco litigation was a class action lawsuit suing the major tobacco manufacturers in this country, primarily located in Virginia. Lawyers from all over the country. The better trial lawyers from the state of Alabama. And it was a very complex case. And it ended up being a case that was settled. and the tobacco companies were paid quite a bit of money. I believe it's still being collected at this time. And not only the state of Alabama shared in the refund or the money that was paid, but other states did too. And it was a very satisfying case to get the refunds made to the public for health reasons. Yeah.
Also, a little bit later in your career, you oversaw pharmaceutical litigation.
Yes. That was a case where the major pharmaceutical companies were sued, several of them, Merck, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and maybe a couple smaller ones, were sued in Alabama, in Montgomery, class action, false advertisement, puffing up the products, controlling the price on the products, and really dumping medicine on the public that was not really suitable for what they claimed it was, as I recall. But mainly it was a false advertisement.
So how long did that litigation last?
Oh, that litigation lasted 2 or 3 weeks, and the jury returned a verdict about $126 million, I believe, and of course the Supreme Court reversed it.
So in
Supreme
favor
Court.
of the plaintiffs?
Yeah, in
there.
favor of the plaintiff, but the Supreme Court of Alabama reversed the case.
And lawyers from all over the country were
New
there to
York,
represent?
primarily New York, New Jersey, then of course Birmingham, the better lawyers from the state of trial lawyer from the state of Alabama, yes. And my mentor, Bill Baxter, was in that case also.
Oh, he tried the case as
He
well?
was part of it.
On plaintiff's side?
Yes.
Okay. I want to tell you a story. A very good friend of mine who is a partner at one of the most prestigious firms in Alabama shared a story about you a couple years ago. A mother had sued a school district for disciplining her child with a paddle. In fact, she had been through several attorneys, firing every single one of them for one issue or another. The school attorney had tried several times to reach out to the plaintiff in an attempt to resolve the matter, but the mother was pretty obstinate. The matter came before you for a hearing, and I'm told that you quickly sized up the tension in the room between the parties and saw a little bit of the theatrics of the mother. So when you addressed the parties, you said, "This court finds that the child is in need of a guardian." My attorney friend happened to be there in the courtroom on a completely different matter. But right there on the spot, and much to his surprise, you reached out and appointed him as the child's guardian. You then told the attorneys they needed to get together and talk about resolving this matter, which they did, and the case was settled. My friend's take on this is that you were concerned that the mother was not acting entirely in the best interest of the child. What you did was set in place a process designed to get the child some kind of benefit, which is exactly what happened in the end. My friend went on to say that he's been in your courtroom lots of times, and there are several stories about you along this vein. He said to me that you always knew how to move a case along, that you have this amazing ability to cut to the chase and get to the heart of the matter, and then get lawyers focused on that. You never disrespected a lawyer, nor did you cotton to playing any kind of games. It's not always about going to trial, is it?
No, it's not. It's about the resolution of the case. If justice can be found and and put in place short of going to trial. The whole question is to find what is just, what is fair. And I don't know the name of your name of your friend.
I'm not going to tell you.
I understand, but I had to have a great deal of respect for him, and he had to have proven over a period of time that he was highly competent, effective, and cared about his clients, whoever he represented. And I was very pleased that he told you that, and I was very pleased that the case was settled, and it was a resolution of the issues, and that the child benefited from the resolution.
Another friend told me that she desperately wanted to help her young nephew who had been convicted of a crime. And you had learned about her concern because of a letter that she had written to the court. On the morning of the sentencing, none of his family members were present. And you realized that the aunt was not aware of his sentencing date. So what you did is you postponed sentencing for a few hours. You had your secretary contact the aunt and request her presence in the courtroom. She complied, and she was present for the sentencing. Why was it so important to you to have her present?
Well, even though the defendant had either pled guilty or found guilty, and I was going to sentence him, but I think in all circumstances, it's important to have someone support you, and a family member particularly, to show that they're still concerned about you. I think that's part of rehabilitation, to know there's still someone out there that care about me, concerned about me, and will come and assist me in the darkest days of my life, and particularly at an early age like that. And I just think and thought it was important that since she had written me about this particular person, that it was only fair that no other family member showed up, and I knew how to contact her, that I contacted her, and I think it was for his benefit to know that somebody in his family, even during that dark time, cared for him. And I believe that would help put him on the road toward rehabilitation.
Well, apparently it did.
Okay.
He went to prison for several years, and he got out, and still to this day, he remembers that his aunt was there
Good.
during the sentencing, and she tells me that he had a couple of missteps once he was out, but for several years now, he has been a very active and contributing member of society.
Well, that's very good to know. Very good to know.
The opioid cases.
Yes.
Tell me about those.
That's going on now. That's in litigation now. Well, I serve as a counsel to the city of Montgomery in my law practice in opioid case that I hope will come to fruition in the very near future. That case is in federal court in Ohio, and I'm working on behalf of the city of Montgomery, but with the law firm that represent all the plaintiffs, the Beasley Allen law firm in Montgomery, and making sure that Montgomery get his fair share of any funds that, providing we receive funds, to help pay the costs of all the health care that Montgomery has spent as a result of the dumping of opioids in this city and on his citizens.
Going back to 1999, you were unanimously elected presiding judge. That is mostly an administrative position, but it comes with a lot of power to direct the operations of the courthouse. What kind of changes did you make during your administration?
Oh yes, I used my position as presiding judge to make sure that when I left, there would be something that I leave an improvement in the administration of the courthouse, the justice system that was not there when I came on as circuit judge, and before I was elected circuit judge. So during my tenure as circuit judge, with the power I had, I got the county commission to approve an authority to operate a community correction program that is still in existence at this time, going well, helping keep offenders out of the penitentiary, also helping nonviolent offenders who are in the penitentiary near the term of being released to be released early and be put into the community correction system that can be supervised as well in the community as in the penitentiary, help them find jobs. If they have drug problems and have received drug treatment in the penitentiary, to get them involved in after treatment programs in the community. And it's going extremely well. It has a staff, very professional staff. The authority has 7 members on the authority that oversee the program, and I'm very proud of it.
Great. You also established a drug court during that time.
Drug court is a very popular court throughout the whole judicial system now because there's so many offenders come through with drug problems. And the purpose is to try to help individuals recover from drug problem they have. And Judge McCooey, who was the circuit judge at the time, and I put the program together. It's still going extremely well now. That's been over 20 years, and it's growing in numbers. And I think the judges there still accept and know the importance of that program. And I'm proud to know that many individuals have gone and finished that program, had the cases dismissed, and are well on their way to being productive citizens.
Is that similar to the restorative justice program?
No, restorative justice is a program that really was very popular on Indian reservations, but also is being practiced and used throughout the court system in many states now. And we instituted in Montgomery. And the way it works is that sometimes the victims just need to talk to the person who has committed a crime against them to help find closure, to help find why. Sometimes the offender just need to talk to the victim to purge their guilt. You bring the two together and let them face each other. The victim, first of all, has to agree to do this, and let them talk to each other, find out what motivated the perpetrator to commit the crime, the suffering that the victim is enduring, and of course then out of that, take into consideration the victim's recommendation on sentencing. Don't have to sentence them to exactly what the victims say, but surely take into consideration. And that's a program that usually in nonviolent crimes, and of course it could be used in violent crimes also, and I think it has been used in a couple of some violent crimes that family members been killed, family members been assaulted, things of that nature. But it's a program that enjoyed the support of a large segment of the community.
You also, during that time period, established the public defender's office. Tell us about that.
Yes, I was high on that. I just wanted, prior to my establishing the public defender's office, clients were represented by court-appointed lawyers. And we had a system where we could contract with lawyers to represent defendants. And that lawyer would be assigned to the particular judge. Well, I just think that is not a very good system, because if the judge signed the contract for the lawyer to represent defendants, the lawyer is not going to ever challenge the judge, or very seldom will challenge the judge on some matter that may be beneficial to his client. And so I support the contract process, but I think in major cases there need to be an independent lawyer, independent from the judge, independent from the court, that solely interested in representing the client. And I was able to get the county commission to designate a building right next door to the courthouse, able to get the state indigent defense fund to assist in establishing the Montgomery County Public Defender's Office, hired a young lady who had been in the district attorney's office and had also practiced in federal court to be the director of the public defender's office. And there's a turnover of lawyers periodically, as you would expect. But I understand the public defender's office and the lawyers over there are getting good training and doing a very good job. I'm really proud of that. And it's keep working to get the same number of lawyers in the public defender's office, in the district attorney's office, same number of investigators, counselors in the public defender's office, as number is in the district attorney's office, and so that's working well. I'm very proud of it.
That's excellent. In 2003, you became president of the Alabama Circuit Judges Association, an association comprised of your peers, who I might add were mostly white. How did you feel being elected by your peers from across the state?
I felt fine. I felt very good, because I had established a record as a very competent, fair judge. And I never, in every job I've ever had, a position I ever had, I never felt less than equal to others. And so I accepted it as a natural occurrence that over a period of years, observing my work with the association, observing me as a person and as a judge, and if they decide to elect me the presiding judge or president of the Circuit Judge Association, I would take it and make it work to try to better the criminal justice system, which we did.
In 2006, you were awarded the Wiley Branton Award from the National Bar Association, named for the former dean of Howard Law School, who was also the attorney who represented the black students who integrated Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas. How did you feel receiving that award?
I felt great about it. The National Bar Association, the Judicial Council of the National Bar Association made that award. And that award was in recognition of my doing seminars, leading discussions, and always encouraging judges to be the best they could be, and helping put together the educational program for the Judicial Council. And that's what Attorney Branton was known for. And I was very honored to receive that award.
You also worked with famed trial attorney Jerry Spence to establish the Jerry Spence Thunderbird Judicial College in Wyoming. How did all of that come about?
Well, Jerry Spence is a very famous trial lawyer in the Midwest, although he's has tried cases on the East Coast, been very successful. His reputation is as district attorney, he never lost a case, and he would say he never lost a case as a defense attorney, and I have reason to believe that is true. And he has a system set up where lawyers will go out, spend a week or 2 weeks, sometimes 3, among themselves training each other in trial tactics and things of that nature. And one of the lawyers that was on the staff was Morris Dees, and he came to see me and suggested that maybe I should, he would like to see me go go out to Wyoming and participate in the discussions going on, since I had tried major cases and long time experience. I did. I went out 3 times and helped set up the Thunderbird Judicial College. A great experience, wonderful experience, indispensable with understanding the full breadth of the judicial system.
In May 2009, yet another milestone, the Phelps Price Justice Center. Share with us the story behind the naming of the building.
Well, Judge Phelps participated in visiting other courthouses in the country when we started to build, and there was a decision to build a new courthouse, the courthouse that named after Phelps Price. I did a lot of talking with the architects, and I had been to a couple cities. One of them was Savannah, Georgia, and had seen their courthouse, and he had the name of the county courthouse in the name of one of the judges I assumed they were honoring at the time. And I came back, and our courthouse was simply Montgomery County Courthouse. And I thought we need to add a little more about what the courthouse was about. It was about a place that really stood for justice. And Judge Phelps, in my opinion, in years during that time, led a lot of innovation, programs and plans around the courthouse. First of all, he started bringing minority students from Alabama State primarily to the courthouse to do internships. We hired a couple, he and I would talk, we hired a couple students to work in the community correction program. And I thought that he had demonstrated enough concern about the justice system that if we were going to name the courthouse, that he would be honored in that regard. Mm-hmm. I approached the county commission about naming the courthouse. The conversation came up with a couple of them about, well, I had done so much around the courthouse. I was the presiding judge implementing these different programs. So in honor of my service, I should be added to the courthouse, the name of the courthouse. So the county commission unanimously approved the resolution that the courthouse henceforth will be named the Montgomery County Courthouse Phelps Price Justice Center. And that is a combination of my work. I'm proud of it. I'm just proud of it.
Mm-hmm. Judge, we're going to move to chapter 4, which is the judge's summation. 33 years.
Right.
Hundreds of cases.
Right.
And we have barely scratched the surface of those. Never opposed in an election in Montgomery, Alabama. These facts say something about you as a judge and how the community felt about you. What has being a judge meant to you?
It has given me the opportunity to not just complain about the criminal justice system, what's wrong with the criminal justice system, how unfair the criminal justice system may be, and all of the warts that it has. Instead of just complaining, to be in a position to help make some changes. And I'm convinced that the work I have done not only has changed the criminal justice system in Montgomery, but throughout the whole state of Alabama. And judges have called me from other states, other jurisdictions, to implement many of the programs that I helped establish here in Montgomery. I just feel that it was a calling for me to obtain the position. I've had great support in what I've done from my family, from my wife, who's been indispensable to my success and accomplishment. And I hold what I have done in the highest regard and esteem, and I'm proud of it.
I asked you this question a little while ago, and I'm going to ask it again. How, if at all, did your opinion about justice, the legal system, fairness, change or evolve over the years when you were a judge?
Well, I think what happened as you grow in the position, you realize that there's some things you can do yourself. And instead of looking to others and criticizing what they are not doing, you are the day. So you just get in there with the courage, with the backbone to figure out what you think is corrected, is wrong and need to be corrected, and make the move toward correcting what you consider the improvement need to be, instead of just complaining about it. And I'm just proud of 33 years, in addition to my law practice and just being in the legal profession, that I have had the courage and the will and the strength to speak on subjects that I think need to be spoken on, spoken about, and people have listened and to a great degree have responded positively to the things that I think would make the system better, and I'm proud of it.
I know you told me once that a friend shared with you that being a judge would be a lonely or solitary existence. Is that true?
Yes. One reason is true because there are many things that you will get pleasure in, places that you would like to go, events that you would like to experience, but as a judge, because of the position you hold, you cannot. And I don't think that was a great price to pay. I mean, I don't find it to have been something that I gave up a lot. But yes, it has been pretty lonely because there's just some things you want to speak out on and speak out about, but because of your position, you cannot. Some events you'll like to attend, it's best for you and the position you hold not to do it. And lonely, yes, but rewarding outweigh the loneliness.
In whom did you seek counsel?
My wife. At all times, throughout my whole career, from the beginning to now, she's been the best counselor I could have. And I never found her counseling to be errant or wrong.
Chapter 5. Chapters yet to be written. You are an unfinished work in progress. One of the good things about life's challenges, you get to find out what you're capable of being far more than you ever thought possible. In 2015, you retired, but you kept working. What have you been doing?
Well, I opened a law office. It's called the Price Group. I was hired on contract to be the senior advisor to the mayor of the city at that time. I held the administrative hearings for the city. We have a new mayor now that was not the one when I retired. I continue in that position of being his advisor, handling the administrative disciplinary hearings. I also serve as of counsel to the city in major cases. I do mediation. I have been very successful doing mediations. And I serve on a major commission for the state of Alabama, the Municipal Marijuana Cannabis Commission, comprised of 11 members to implement the new marijuana medical benefit program for the state of Alabama. So I stay busy, but I don't see it as being busy or work because it's things I enjoy doing.
Did you do what you set out to accomplish?
I accomplished more than I set out to accomplish. Been a rewarding career, bringing my family along with me. Both my children are attorneys, successful attorneys. My wife is still my greatest counselor and advisor.
Is there anything you'd change?
Not a thing.
Judge, our time has come to an end, but I want to ask you, as we close, if there are any final words that you'd like to share, words of wisdom.
I think I would say to young people, if any ever read or hear about this transcript or video, to set your goal, make it positive. Focus on what you're capable of doing. Don't be wide-eyed thinking that you set your goal on something you're not physical or mentally or intellectually capable of doing. Be disciplined and be willing to persevere and pay the price. And it's a matter of who you stay away from, not a matter of who you associate with. That would be my advice.
Great advice.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for this time. I continue to learn things about you, and I learned some more during our time together today. It's been marvelous insight on an incredible career and an incredible human being. Thank you.
I want to thank you for doing this interview. Tears come to my eyes too, in the way that you have done it, in your sincerity and the praise that you have laid on me. And you speak for your brother and you speak for your mother. I'm proud of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.